myself a like.
Yeah, let me give us a like.
Let me go check the page at hand.
Liked it.
Alrighty, we're officially live. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Let me turn on my video camera, and yep, here we are. Oh, let me move this chair. Because guys, my back hurts so much, I decided to do the standing route type of desk. So hopefully you guys are in for a big treat as you see me just stand up this whole time. But everybody, welcome to The Charge. This is, of course, your boy Bernie here, giving it to you live, along with, of course, the OG, the one and only, Pete. How you doing, Pete?
Yo. Good, brother. Living it up.
Living it up indeed. You know, this week, I think it kind of marks the 1 week of NBA returning. It's marked the 1 week of like what's been going on for the NBA since it started. The good news is that from December 24th until now, there's been zero positive cases. So that is a great sign for the NBA that none of their star players are being affected by it too much. So, we have to give the NBA credit for that. But before we kind of get going into this, guys, please remember to hit that like button. Also remember to hit that subscribe button. If you're new to the channel, guys, remember every like, every subscribe gets this channel more and more notoriety to where people will be interested in watching this content. We want to create a community. That's what this channel was originally intended for. And so if you guys are interested, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell your family, tell your friends, tell whoever you know that loves basketball to follow this channel. And we'll continue to kind of talk about NBA news and rumors and also our basketball opinions. And Pete, are you ready to talk some basketball, or do you got some stuff in the intro?
No, I'm ready, dude. I've just been playing Fortnite again. I don't know why I'm doing that, but
you getting your V-Bucks?
Dude, it's kind of fun. Not gonna lie, I've been a Fortnite hater since it came out, but it's kind of good. It's kind of good.
I was gonna say you've been the biggest Fortnite hater I've ever seen in my life, but here we are. You're playing Fortnite. You're chilling. But let's get started in our first story really quick, and that is, of course, what is going on with Russell Westbrook and the Washington Wizards. So we know that the Washington Wizards right now are, I believe, 0-4, if I'm not mistaken. Russell Westbrook gets his triple-double. Bradley Beal gets his points, gets his stats up. But meanwhile, the team is just absolutely struggling as it pertains to them trying to compete and contend for an NBA playoff spot. I know you and I kind of talked about it. We both were at least I was iffy on the Wizards having a playoff spot. I think you were saying that they were going to make it.
I thought they were the 6th seed. I still think they have the talent to be a 6th seed, but yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. Not looking like it so far.
Yeah, not looking like it so far. And the reason why I titled this stream, if I'm not mistaken, I titled it why Russell Westbrook, will Westbrook ever win a championship, is because I think that the MVP, or like the MVP, the stats, I think that's what matters to Westbrook the most. And it might be a little bit harsh to say at this moment, but what I am disappointed in right now is that the Wizards can't seem to find a way to win games. I mean, let's look at their schedule really quick. And before, guys, let me get you guys to the live scene. Transition.
Transition.
Let's see here. Let's get you guys to here. National Basketball Association. And let's go over to the Washington Wizards and kind of look at the teams that they've played against so far. So if we go to the Wizards page, we look at their schedule. They have played Philadelphia, which, would probably be a hard team to beat with their squad. I think that's probably a hard team. But then you have Orlando twice, which I think you could at least win one of those games. Beal is going off for 31, 39, 29, 29. And then they lost to Chicago the other night. And that, to me, is like the biggest red flag of them all. Because to be honest with you, Pete, when I look at everything, sup, Supreme Gamer, we have Pete in the chat as well, or we have Pete in the live commentary, so make sure you say hi to him as well. But Pete, looking at their schedule, seeing everything that's going on, talk to me. What is going on with the Washington Wizards, and also what's going on with Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook? I thought this was supposed to be a different type of situation for Westbrook and Beal, that they were like a new dynamic duo.
Yeah, and the other part too is Denny is very good. I mean, can we say top 5 rookies so far? I mean, I think that's pretty fair to say.
I think he's top 5. I mean, there's a couple rookies, and we'll talk about it in our kind of like our week 1 like biggest
Mhm.
winners category.
Yeah.
But keep going on with like what's your mindset right now for the Washington Wizards?
What's up, Supreme Gamer? Yeah, couple reasons here. Let me lay it out for you. One, I think in this weird season with 4-game preseason, no training camp, none of that. I think it's a weird case study to see how NBA stars going to new teams will mesh with their team right away, right? And I think Westbrook in particular is one where he's kind of a team dominator, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he comes in and just kind of rules the roost when he's there as far as on the court is concerned. So I think meshing with new players is always going to be a weird fit for him, right? And last season he did get the preseason, he did get training camp with the Houston Rockets, so the fit was a little easier to, it just happened a little quicker into the regular season. I think he was more prepared. The biggest thing for the Wizards for me, I don't think Scott Brooks is a good coach. I don't. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think he's been a good coach for years. And I really think of all the coaches in the league to have made an NBA Finals in the last 15 years, he's gotten like the biggest leash of somebody who hasn't really performed very well. Is that fair to say?
I
I mean,
mean,
he,
that's definitely fair to say, man. Like like sorry to butt in here, but like Scott Brooks,
no, no,
man,
no.
like he's like one of those guys where you're just like, how did this guy keep getting a coaching job? I think it's like the fact that they couldn't win with that Durant Westbrook in those last couple years where they basically had the Warriors up 3-1 and then absolutely lost to them. That to me, I'm like, you have such a talented roster, you have such a talented squad, and you can't do anything there. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that you got to go, and I don't
I
know
think
how he's gotten a leash like that.
I think it's him, man. I just don't think you can have a winning team with that guy right now. And the biggest thing for him for the longest time was, why is this guy a head coach? Because he's a good talent developer. We'd seen it in Oklahoma City where he had a lot of young talent grow into their own very
Right.
quickly. And then when he started with the Wizards, the same thing could be said. You got a young John Wall, young Bradley Beal developed into stars. I don't necessarily know if that's true anymore,
Mm-hmm.
for one. And two, it's very clear, which has been clear, I think, for the last 5 years. The guy is not a winning head coach. He's just not. That
Yeah.
I think it's that simple, man. I just don't think the guy can coach a team of the caliber. And this is saying a lot because the Wizards' caliber is not super high, but they do have some pretty high pedigree players on their team. I just don't think he can do it, man. I just don't think he's the guy.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at their roster really quick. I mean, they have some decent players like we talked about. Danny Avdia looking like a very good rookie so far in his campaign. You got Bradley
Yep.
Beal, of course, 27 years old, still doing it, 28 million in cap space. You have Bertans, who you just signed, who I think he's a good pickup for them. I like the way that he stretches the floor. You got Isaac Bonga, who I think could be like a solid kind of I don't know if he's necessarily starting at the moment. I don't think he is. I mean, let's look at Isaac Bonga. I think he's like
No,
maybe
no, no, no.
he's like second off the bench for them. So,
Yeah.
and then you got Rui, who's still coming back from this like mysterious injury. I don't even know where this injury is. I don't even know like what's going on with him. You got Robin Lopez, who's shooting 3-point shots. I saw it in the preseason, and I hope that he never shoots again because that jump shot is absolutely terrible. We'll show a video of it. I'll find it on Twitter and I'll show you
Oh
guys.
boy.
But it is absolutely god awful, and I don't know why Scott Brooks is allowing him to shoot that much.
Their team is good. Their team is like, honestly, that is not a bad roster. If you look, the big thing for me when I look at a team that's like, are they competitive? Do you have 8 dudes? 8 dudes is a great number. If you have 8 guys on your team that are, I don't hate watching you on the court. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like you're an above average to average team, which should qualify as a playoff team, right? Denny is awesome. He's already NBA ready. Thomas Bryant is a very solid player. Bradley Beal obviously is a superstar, 30-point per game player last season. Russell Westbrook, say what you will about him, the guy is a triple double waiting to happen every single night, as everyone knows. Robin Lopez, his jumper is ugly, but the guy is a good player. Robin Lopez has been good in the league for a decade. Like, he's solid, right? I don't really Troy Brown Jr. is a solid player too. I just don't really understand how you look at the way that this team has performed with the players that they've had on their roster. And last season was kind of out of the normal because their team did suck. But how, as the owner of the Washington Wizards, do you see what Scott Brooks has done with this team in the last few years and said that this is the guy that we want to coach this team? I don't really understand that.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like the thing with it. Like let's see here. I think this. No, that's not the jump shot. I was kind of. Where is it? Oh, I don't think I. Anyway, doesn't really matter.
It's
But
all good. It is hideous. Oh, here
it
it is.
did you find it?
Oh, I thought you were looking at it. No,
No,
maybe
no,
I'm
no,
wrong.
no. I'm just trying to like look, but I don't seem to find it. But yeah, just kind of going back to the Wizards, everybody. Like the Wizards right now are just kind of in this. Apparently, Rui will be back with them in minutes tomorrow. Supreme Gamer Robin
Nice.
Lopez 3-point shot is the worse than Al Horford. Supreme Gamer Wizards seem like they're not a playoff team just because of their defense. My girlfriend, ooh, I like the fit today. Thank you.
It is nice.
Um,
It is nice.
the fit is nice, but no, I think the frustrating thing for the Wizards, I feel like for me, is just the fact that we've seen Bradley Beal do these type of numbers. We've seen Russell Westbrook put up triple doubles on kind of an average team. And I think it's kind of the same old story. Like just because you replaced John Wall doesn't mean you replaced the head coach. You didn't replace the GM. You didn't replace all the other players that even though I do think that there are some pretty decent players on this roster, when you go to the second unit for this team, I don't think I'm necessarily found with oozing with confidence that these guys can get the job done while Westbrook or Beal are off the bench. And if you have Danny Avdija, he's still a rookie. I think he's still growing and developing, so I'm not putting that much onus and pressure on him either. And
Mhm.
so I think where we're at right now is just like this Wizards team, I think they need to start looking at a rebuild. They need to start looking at getting some assets. And I think that this is a team that really should be looking at like what could we trade right now to get ourselves in a position to get these next 2 years some really good draft picks, because we know that in this next coming draft,
Yeah.
there are some really good players. And so you need to make sure that you get yourself in position for one of those players, because I already know that this team is not a playoff team. And I know that you guys say it's a 6 seed. I know you guys are saying that they could potentially play in the play-in games, but
Mhm.
I'm not a big believer in this team, and I think that they need to start looking at what they could get rid of in terms of like stuff that they don't, or like players that they don't really necessarily need at the moment, and
Yeah.
start building for the future. And I think that's what they need to do.
I still think this is a playoff team. I really do. Like when you look at their roster, I just don't see how there's a lot of teams overperforming in the East right now that I
Mm-hmm.
don't see. And we'll get into this as we go through the stream a little bit, but the league is so upside down right now with some of
Yeah.
the records of some of these teams. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not sustainable for a lot of them. And
Right.
I think the losing ways of the Wizards is not sustainable in its own right too. I think that they just have too much talent to keep losing to garbage teams. I just
Mm-hmm.
don't see it happening. However, I do think that this is like a major trade team waiting to happen for Beal.
Yeah.
And
That's where I'm at.
I'm gonna throw a trade out there just because I
Okay.
think about this trade all the time. And I there's not many more trades in the league I would love to see more than this. For fit reasons and because I think it would actually benefit both teams in the long run. What do you think about Bradley Beal to the Denver Nuggets? Okay. For some package of picks with Michael Porter Jr. and maybe Gary Harris. But you'd have to get a lot of picks, obviously, because Beal is a top 20 player in the league, right? I think that kind of fits the timeline of both teams really well. And I absolutely love Bradley Beal alongside Jamal Murray and Jokic. Am I crazy?
I think they're gonna want a lot more than that. They're
I,
gonna
I do
probably.
I do too. I do too. And you know, I'm giving you a very loose pick. Like I think like Michael Porter Jr. playing the way he has played so far is not enough to get the to move the needle for that trade.
Yeah.
However, I think that there is some sort of package. Like if the Nuggets could put a package together for Harden, like teams say they could, people think they can. There's no reason they can't put one together for Bradley Beal. Is that crazy? I don't think there's any way you could put a trade together for Harden and not do the same for Beal.
I mean, I'm surprised that teams are not really looking at Beal all that seriously. I don't know why. Because I think that with Bradley Beal, like he's a guy that won't cause the headaches, even though James Harden, he's doing his thing. Obviously 10 or 12 pounds overweight. He's still scoring the rock like crazy, but his trade value is
Mhm.
crazy too. I don't understand like where I feel like Bradley Beal is kind of like in the wings, ready to become like a second or really a second star option on a team. And I'm surprised that no teams have really kind of looked into like getting him, look to like try and get him to really help out this whatever team that it is. I do think that Bradley Beal could be a great fit in Denver, like you said, but I think the Washington Wizards would want way too much. They'd probably want a James Harden S type of package for Bradley
Dude, why
Beal.
not? Why not? I mean, you look at a team like the Denver Nuggets with Bradley Beal on their roster, and you throw out a starting five of with any combination of Jokic, Beal, and Jamal Murray. Who's offensively better than that team? I don't know if there's any team in the league that would be able to keep up with them offensively. I'm just throwing that out there because they do have lots of young talent that would be. I mean, man, it would be worthy of some sort of package trade with picks. I mean, Bol it looks pretty awesome in flashes, right? Michael
Hmm.
Porter Jr., there's not many players of his caliber in his age range, I don't think. And who knows what you have with Rui, really? Who knows? I like Rui a lot. Who knows what you have with him right now?
Right.
What his commitment is. Denny Avdia, I mean, he needs more time with the ball in his hands. And how much of that is he going to get with Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook on his team? I just don't think there's a lot to be had. And I don't really see the upside if this is the way your team is going to play of keeping a guy like Beal. What's the upside? Rebuild. Do it. Trade for a bunch of guys that could have the potential to be like weird, great fits on a pretty solid team and get a bunch of picks back. Do something, you know?
Yeah.
Definitely get rid of Scott Brooks. Definitely. That's the big one.
Hmm. And then we have some people saying here, should they build around Russ and Beal? Girlfriend saying, who's the guest speaker? Oh, this is Pete, babe. This is
Hello.
Pete.
Hi, Gabby.
Yeah, this is Pete, the OG on the channel. And then Supreme Gamer at the end said Bradley Beal to the Warriors. Yeah, I mean,
Interesting.
I don't think they have enough trade assets in my opinion, unless they trade away that
Yeah.
Timberwolves pick. The
Wiseman, I mean, obviously would have to go to.
Wiseman and the I think they have to trade those trade picks that they have. I think they have their own, and then they have the Timberwolves draft pick right now, which, I know that right now the Timberwolves, I believe they're either 2-1 or 3-1 if I'm not mistaken. So, we'll see at the end of the season where that draft pick falls. But I think that I don't know if I necessarily see the Warriors having enough to trade for him. When I look at teams in the NBA to see that they could potentially trade, I think the Brooklyn Nets prior to this Dinwiddie injury could have had a chance at it. I think like if any team was really going to make a move for Bradley Beal at this point, man, this is tough. I really don't see a team unless my Celtics want to get in there and say we want a guy that can get the ball in the hoop. We trade away Jaylen Brown or Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart. I think we'd have to give up way too much to get him too.
I think that'd be a good fit.
But it's like other than that, I really don't see a fit for Bradley. Like what team is going to trade for him at this point? I
I don't
really
know,
don't.
but I
I
would
don't see
say
any.
as a major fan of Beal, I might be higher on Beal than most people are. I don't know why anybody wouldn't want to kick the tires on him. Like if you could put a package together and you're a borderline top 4 seed in your conference,
Mm-hmm.
why are you not trying to throw something together for this guy? He's never been a cultural fit or a problem with the team, regardless of how many problems are going on in the locker room. It's never
Right.
really Beal out there, making a mess of things, spilling the
Right.
tea. And the guy averaged 30 points a game last season on a terrible team,
Yep.
right? Dude, there's not many guys in the league I would want to trade for more than Beal. And he's 27. Like he's in his prime, about to be in his prime, right?
Exactly. I mean, like right now, what
Yeah.
we're seeing from the Wizards right now is that like Bradley Beal is still putting up his regular numbers. You see Russell Westbrook putting up his triple double averages, but I think for Russell Westbrook, I think with Russell Westbrook, I feel like he's a guy that just wants to be in a situation where he can just get his triple doubles, get his money, and that's kind of what the legacy that he wants to go down. That's like the route that he would like to go.
Yeah.
Where I feel like is Bradley Beal. Well, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that because Russell Westbrook thinks that style of play is what's going to win him a championship. Like that's the only way he knows how to play, and that's the way that he knows that he can get to a championship. And ultimately,
Yeah.
that's not going to get you there, not unless you're born in like the 1950s or 60s, where that probably could have gotten you to a championship. But now in
Mhm.
2020, it's a different game, man. Like the it's even like 2001, you had a chance. I mean, we saw Allen Iverson do it with that 76ers team that was pretty much god awful except for him. That team was more defensive oriented than really people would like to admit. Um,
Yeah.
but I think they need to start looking at Bradley Beal, start getting rid of him. This is probably the highest value he has at this moment. Capitalize on that because I'm not sure what Bradley Beal's contract situation is. Let me look it up really quick.
Did he not sign an extension last year?
Was
Middle
it
of last
last
season?
year?
I think so. I thought he signed his max extension in the middle of last season.
Yeah,
I
in the
might be
1920 season. Yeah, you're right. So he signed a 5-year extension. I mean, he's basically,
Tra-
or actually, wait a minute.
maybe a top 10 trade asset in the whole league. I mean, I would, dude, I would put a package together for him right now. They're 0-4. He skipped media today.
Hmm.
Trade for this guy. Dude, put him on a winning team, and he's gonna pay off for you, in my opinion. But can we move to another team? And I need to talk about a team on the opposite side of the Eastern Conference,
Okay, let me know. The New York
the
Knicks?
Atlanta Hawks. No, can we talk about the Atlanta Hawks?
They have a
Undefeated Atlanta Hawks, aren't they undefeated?
undefeated with a big game tonight against the Nets.
We can we talk about this team for a few minutes?
Yeah, let's do it.
Do you believe in the Atlanta Hawks so far?
I believe that they will be in the playoffs. Do I believe that they're going to be a championship contending team this season? No. It's because strictly the reason why they won't be a championship contending team this year is because defensively, they're probably one of the worst in the league. Like, they really should have beaten the Pistons. I believe it was last night or the night before. They really should have beaten that
Mhm.
Pistons team that they were playing. And, Trae Young and Bogdanovich were playing really well. Trae Young is right now, like, on an MVP type of caliber season so far, like, off to that start. Um,
Yeah.
and I think the Wiz or the Hawks right now are really relying heavily on their offense. I think Lloyd Pierce is a great coach, but defensively is kind of where my concern is for this team because like
Yeah.
what I'm seeing defensively from these teams is that, or from this team specifically, is that like basically no one on this team can stop anybody. It's basically Swiss cheese.
Nope.
You're trying to outscore the opponent rather than trying to keep the score down. And so that concerns me a lot that they're giving up big leads as well in that Pistons game. And so I don't believe that they are a championship contending team yet, but I do believe that they're a playoff team because they can score the rock and they have no problem finding players off the bench to score. I did say in my stream, I think either last night or a couple nights ago, I think the Hawks are going to regret signing Danilo Gallinari.
Okay. See, I think that is one of the weirder takes for this team. I think he was a great signing. However, dude, I just don't see it.
You don't see
I
it?
might, I might be a big hater on this Hawks team.
You might have to drink some haterade.
Dude. I think I might be a Trae hater, and I didn't really think I was until this season. I just don't understand how you can be literally the worst defender in the league and be the MVP. I
Steph
don't
Curry.
understand how people jump to conclusions after 3 games. People never learn ever, ever, ever with the NBA. They watch a guy like Trae Young put up 30 points against the Pistons, who is there a team worse than the Pistons in the NBA? I don't think there is.
Um,
I don't think there is. They're god awful. They are
the
so bad.
Warriors.
Dude, I'm taking the Warriors over the Pistons. I'm taking them.
That was a close game last night.
I'm taking the Warriors over Pistons just because the ceiling of their talent is so much higher, right? Like
Hmm.
Steph Curry on any given night can beat most teams, right? That's fair to say. Nobody on the Pistons is like that. Blake, I like Blake a lot. Come on, right? Come on. They beat the Bulls, the Grizzlies, and the Pistons. I like the Grizzlies. I had them as my 6th seed in the West, which was maybe a reach, especially now that Ja is out, which we'll talk about in a little bit too.
Yeah.
But dude, how do people find themselves doing this over and over again? You watch 3 games against weak teams, and then people are instantly Trae's the MVP. This team is for real. They have played bottom tier teams, and they're still awful on defense. And you have the worst defender in your league as your best player.
I mean, that was Curry. I mean, Curry was a unanimous MVP, and he's probably, I would say, like right now, I think Steph Curry's getting exposed for his defending right now. Like the reason why, like, not only the fact that like the basically the second unit of the even the first unit of the Warriors just sucks.
Mhm.
Besides, like a couple guys, they're still waiting for Draymond Green to come back. Whether or not Draymond Green makes a huge impact on the team, that's yet to be seen. But I do think that with Steph Curry kind of winning the MVP and showing you how it's done. I think that leaves the door open for a guy like Trae, who I don't necessarily think is the MVP candidate just yet. I still think that he needs to grow and develop his game a little bit more offensively,
Yeah.
even still, because his passing I think is way better than Steph Curry's. And we've talked about it before, Pete. I remember we did a video on that, like about Trae Young and Steph Curry comparisons. But I think
Mhm.
that, like I said, because the door is open for Steph Curry, like he was the unanimous MVP, basically got all the first place votes. Everyone else got goose eggs. Like LeBron James should have definitely gotten some votes that year. I can't remember who else was in that MVP race, but
It
with the
definitely could have been LeBron.
and that just kind of goes to show you that the MVP is really, I think it's not like a nothing award, but it's definitely an award where you have a lot of media influence on
Oh,
like
it's narrative.
on,
Yeah, narrative,
it's
100.
just it's the narratives that these medias people create. Like we saw how the Warriors did with Steph Curry, and like Steph Curry can like right now we're seeing probably the decline of Steph Curry just a little bit, just because like really Kelly Oubre doesn't play the same way as a guy like Klay Thompson. You got James Wiseman not really playing the way that Draymond Green plays. You got like Andrew Wiggins playing like Andrew Wiggins. No commentary needed for that. Um,
Uh, I I
it's
think the biggest difference, and the thing that, and this is one of the reasons why I think Clay is maybe one of the most underrated players in the history of the league. One of the main reasons Curry's defense was let slide for so long is that he had the perfect pairing partner to go alongside him. You have an absolute elite defensive stopper in Clay who you can hide Curry behind, right? And we've seen now the last 2 seasons that without that, look at what the Warriors have done. That's where the situational difference between the Hawks and the Warriors with Steph is the clearest to me. They don't have a Clay. Like they don't, not I'm not even just saying like ceiling wise. I'm saying defensively there's nobody even in the stratosphere of Clay at the guard position for the Hawks.
that's true.
Like Bogdanovich is, I like him a lot. He's not a defender. He's awful on defense too. Kevin Herter, like I don't know, right? I don't. He's not Clay. It's that simple. Dude, I don't know, man. The media is always doing this stuff, and I just wish that people wouldn't fall for it so quickly. Like stats is not everything,
Right.
especially just offensive stats. It really is mind blowing. And I'm not a Trey complete hater. Like I think the guy has MVP potential in his career. He's very clearly an all-star in the making. But saying that the Atlanta Hawks were 3-0 and have beat 2 of the worst teams in the league so far are serious contenders, and he's the MVP frontrunner, I think, dude, it's ultimate tomfoolery in the league yet again, or in the media, I should say, yet again.
Yeah, I mean the media will always do this. So we all have seen like the stories and the headlines. If we remember a couple years back when this Atlanta Hawks team was like 60 wins, and everyone was like, "Oh, LeBron James' biggest test is going to be this Atlanta Hawks team. They have 4 All-Stars." And the LeBron just made quick work of them, basically a little whap whap, and just like they're already back. He's back to the NBA
Yeah.
Finals, and the Hawks fell apart. They decided to kind of destroy the team, and that's kind of where I'm at with this Atlanta Hawks team. Is that like I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I titled a video yesterday, "Is Trae Young an MVP candidate?" Also falling into that narrative as well. But I also am a realist. Like I know that Trae Young right now defensively is probably going to play that free safety, strong safety role where he's just going to kind of roam around, and that's kind of the defense he has to play. where we saw Steph Curry like absolutely destroy teams doing that, getting a lot of steals, getting those like I'm gonna come around and pickpocket you from the side because you're not paying attention. And
Mhm.
we're seeing now that Steph Curry's getting exposed on defense right now. Like he's realizing that he has to work just as hard on defense as he is offense, and that's why I believe his 3-point percentage right now is like probably the lowest of his career since probably his rookie year.
Yeah.
And so to me, where I see the Atlanta Hawks is that I think they're a great team. They're a good contending team for a playoff spot. But are they a good team to challenge for the title? No, because I don't think they do. Like I said, they don't do everything solidly. Like they do the offensive stuff beautifully. Like Trae Young averaging 7 assists, 34 points, you
Yeah.
know. But when it comes to defensively, that to me is where I think this team kind of lacks, and where I think they'll really struggle because of it. And so I
Yeah.
want to see them get better at it. I want to see more Bruno Fernando. I think that he's a better player, in my opinion, than having Clint Capella out there all the time. Even though I know Clint Capella is your better like rim protector, I think Bruno Fernando like stretches the floor out more, does a lot more for you hustle wise, and is actually more mobile than Clint Capella. So I think if they're going to go with the whole offensive gimmick, then I think they need to play Bruno Fernando. And I think that you could see DeAndre Hunter develop into that role of being like that defender. But right now, you need more than just one guy, and so
A
they're
hundred
they're
percent.
they're in the search for that guy right now.
Well, and that's why they signed somebody like Chris Dunn. They signed Rondo, right?
Hmm.
Rondo is, you know, he's an older guy, and I know he played awesome in the finals in the playoffs last season. Rondo's not going to change. He's not going to move the needle defensively for you on his own at this point. Same with DeAndre on the opposite end of things. He's too young to do that. And then Chris Dunn is a zero on offense. So it none of it fits like in a really competitive playoff series to me. Like even a team that I'm not very high on, that a lot of people obviously are, the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't see how Atlanta matches up with them even a little bit. I just don't understand how people can jump that far ahead of things.
Yeah,
But I think that's enough of my hate for the Atlanta Hawks. I don't really hate them. I shouldn't say that. I just the way that people felt about Houston a couple years ago and James Harden. I think that I'm in that position with Atlanta. I just don't understand why this is considered to be winning basketball until somebody does it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of like what I've been noticing here. And then we got here the Packers just signed Snack Harrison. Huh, interesting.
Hopefully he plays. I like him.
Yeah. And then I think another team that we should kind of move on to from that is like kind of the disappointment that I saw last night. And maybe we can
Yeah.
just talk about it as a whole because I think me and my boy Josh, we talked about it last night. Is the fact that right now we are seeing a lot of blowouts. If we go
Yes.
back to a couple nights ago, it was the Clippers, they got blown out. Now we've got the two TNT games, the Heat game, that was like a 50-point game, and then you had the Pelicans and the Phoenix game be a blowout. We're seeing a lot of blowouts right now. Why do you think there's so many blowouts right now in the NBA? Like, is it because the fans aren't there? Is it because teams aren't taking it serious? Like, what is your perspective on why right now we're seeing a lot of blowouts in the NBA?
I think it's just season readiness. I really don't think it's going to last very long where we stay at this clip of blowouts. I just don't I don't think it's sustainable for a lot of these teams. Like last night, I think that Milwaukee game was pretty fluky. They had just played the Knicks a couple nights ago and I think they were like 9 of 32 from 3 and then they 2 games later break the record for most threes in a game. It just seems like these teams are kind of working their way into readiness. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't really get any preparation time, so it's kind of like the NFL with the pace the offenses were at the beginning of the season was historic, and then it kind of leveled out a bit. Like
Yeah.
defenses were just getting like pushed around every single game for the first 8 weeks, and then teams got ready, defenses got better, and it stopped happening as much. And I think that the NBA is going to be fairly similar with that. I think these teams are using, and the Lakers are a perfect example of this. That team is using these first 4 games they've played so far. This is extended preseason. the rotations they're putting out on the court, they're obviously still trying to figure out who their 9 guys are as the league as they start playing. And I think finding those rotations usually does not happen in the regular season. Like they've spent the summer league and the preseason figuring out guys they want to be getting those minutes. And right now they have to use regular season games. And with that, you're going to run into games where you have some bums on the court and your team gets blown out. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like last night, I think the most disappointing game that for me, what I saw was really the Pelicans and the Suns game because I really thought that Stan Van Gundy, like, man, I'm not a big believer in Stan Van Gundy. I always thought he was kind of like a fluky coach. Um, no, he did get to his team. He did get his team to an NBA Finals with the Orlando Magic, with Dwight Howard and all them. But like, really, like you should really be running up and down the court with a team with Lonzo, with Zion, with Brandon Ingram. Steven
Yeah.
Adams, I'm not sure why. Like, I understand, like, he's a solid player, can get you some big rebounds, but I don't see the appeal in playing him 23 minutes a game. Like, I mean, he was 5 of 5 last night from the floor, got you 11 points, but I just don't see the appeal in playing him, especially if you want to go up and down the court. They've had some interesting moves. They got Eric Bledsoe, obviously, in that trade with the Milwaukee Bucks. You got Lewis Jr., who's their draft pick that played about 10 minutes, looked pretty decent in a little bit of spurts here and there. You got Josh Hart, who I don't know what happened to his game, but it's kind of MIA at the moment, where I'm not really seeing him take advantage of the situation, not really chucking up shots. Playing 22 minutes, I expect more than just 2 shots from my 3-point shooter. You got Hernan Gomez getting you 7, Nico Melli getting you like 16 minutes a game, JJ Redick only taking 5 shots, 0 of 2. I think he's kind of a little bit past his prime. But like where I'm disappointed in the most is just like I feel like this team is really struggling to score the rock. And
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of this Pelicans team because I think Zion, Brandon Ingram, and Lonzo Ball, I think that's a good pairing. And we know that Lonzo Ball did not sign the extension, so he could be a free agent this year. And I think he's probably going to move because I think he sees the writing on the wall from this Pelicans team. Is like, I don't think the Pelicans necessarily believe in a guy like Lonzo.
Yeah, I don't think they see the long-term fit with Lonzo. I don't. But I think they're another team where like I like Stan Van Gundy. I think he's a good coach. I think he gets the best out of most of his players. And it's kind of the same with a guy that like Tibbs, right? Tom Thibodeau.
Dibs.
Like he is never gonna not make you play your hardest. Whether or not that's what you want from certain guys
Mm-hmm.
is a different question. But Stan Van Gundy is going to make you play. And if you're not playing the way he wants you to play, you're not going to get minutes. He's not
Right.
doing everything that the front office wants him to do all the time. And obviously, we saw that with the Pistons, where he was the front office there, and it did not work at all for them. But I think they're a good team. I had them as a playoff team in our predictions as well. I still think they're going to get there, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's interesting, that's for sure. They're just not playing the way that I think makes the most sense for
Yeah.
their team.
I think they need to just go with Hernan Gomez, or they need to go with Nico Melli. To kind of go like not a small ball lineup necessarily because you have Brandon Ingram who's like 6'10" with like a 7
Yep.
foot 4 wingspan, and then you got like Zion Williamson who's a freak athlete who can go and grab you boards. He's kind of in that tweener role again where it's like he can either be a power forward or a small forward, and if he gets switched, I mean we saw the mismatches with like DeAndre Ayton. Ayton kind of cooked him a little bit. Ayton didn't really play necessarily the best. uh, I just mentioned this to my boy yesterday. Trae Young getting MVP over Dame. We'll talk about the
Yeah.
Blaze. We'll talk about the Blazers
Yeah.
in just a second. Um, but yeah,
Talk
just kind of going back to the Pelicans. I'm worried about them just in terms of like offensively. What I'm seeing, like when they played the Heat, I was like, but this night when they played the Phoenix Suns, the Phoenix Suns are for real this year. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
I really should have put them in my top 4, but we'll see if Luka can kind of get back into that like Luka MVP caliber type of race that he's been entering in. They got Kristaps Porzingis is now trying to practice now. And so we'll see what happens with that type of situation. But man, like the Pelicans need to go back to the drawing board because there are some things where I could see where he needs to work on some offensive movement because right now you're just getting nothing from your bench, and I think that's a huge concern.
Yeah. Definitely need more minutes from their rookie, too. I think he should be playing way more than 10 minutes. Maybe like 18, 19, somewhere in there for now. He needs more time. Let's talk about another team on the opposite side of the spectrum. Somebody overperforming. What about the Orlando Magic?
Orlando Magic with Vucevic, with my
4
guy
0.
Boos.
Can you issue an apology to somebody on the Magic? I think they're deserving of an apology.
Who?
Mr. Cole Anthony.
Cole Anthony. Oh, when I called him out.
No, I just think you don't like Cole Anthony very much, and he is so far to me and what I've seen, I think he's a steal in the draft.
Stealing the
He,
draft.
do you, when you watch him play, do you not think he looks like he's been in the league for a couple seasons?
When I watch him play, obviously he only gets about, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he gets like about 20 minutes, like 18 minutes a game is what I've seen. I
Yeah.
do like some of his game. Like I said, if you're asking him to be a starter, then I don't think he's necessarily like the guy that you want. But a guy that comes off the bench, gets you some scoring opportunities, and can get you guys open looks. He averages about 4 rebounds, 4 assists a game. So he's a hustler, and that's something that a lot of teams have kind of they kind of need on their team. But I've been liking what I'm seeing so far from Cole Anthony. Obviously, I don't think that he's going to be like star or superstar, but I do think that for a role caliber type of player, especially on this Magic team where he's not necessarily asked to be like the number one guy or the number two guy or even the number three guy. He's just
Yeah.
asked to come in, do his thing, and he's been doing it perfectly so far. So, what I do issue an apology for, kind of like where I backtrack my statement for him is that, I that he's maybe not too small, but definitely like the decision
Mhm.
making I think could be a little bit better. But he's looking to be like a great off the bench type of player that if you need like a strong point guard to come off the bench, he's going to be that
Uh-huh.
guy.
100%. And I've been much higher on Cole Anthony than you for a while. Even when he was in college and things didn't go very well for UNC, I still was a believer in him. I don't know, man. I love the way he plays the game. Like his feel on the court just seems more mature than a lot of people, even a year or two older than him. So I'm a firm believer in him. However, I'm going to issue an apology to somebody on the team for not making the prediction that my heart said. And I didn't even mention this. And I'm going to sound like a goober because, of course, now that he looks great, I'm saying this, but I really did feel this way before the season. Markel Fultz, I think he might be your most improved player this season.
He's looking to get there, man.
I think he's going to get it, man. He is really good. Markel Fultz is really good. And it's finally starting to happen for him. The potential that everybody knew he had is starting to come out. And clearly, he's still not a great shooter. Like, he's just not. But the guy is a stud. He is really awesome at running the point for your team. And this is a guy I feel like you put him on a good team, a winning team. And that is not what this Magic team is going to be in the long run. I still don't believe in them. But this guy, I think, is a winner. I think you could put him on a really good team and get great minutes from him. Like what he does for your team is incredible.
Yeah, man. I think I think for both teams it worked out kind of well for them because obviously with Ben Simmons, like he's kind of wanted that point guard spot. But at the same time, I think the 76ers made a mistake in like
Mm-hmm.
and letting
Terrible
him
trade.
go.
Terrible trade. Dude, they gave him away for what did they get? A second round pick for him?
I don't even remember what they got. Let's see.
It was one single pick, I think, in a player, and he wasn't a very good player in return.
Let's see here.
I
So I
wish I
have it up
remember
here. Let me get out of here, Orlando Magic. So to land the 20-year-old Fultz, the Magic traded guard Jonathan Simmons,
that. Yep.
protected first round pick in the 2020 draft, top 20. That could look to be kind of bad. And a second round selection in the upcoming June draft. And this was, of course, when he acquired him. I don't remember what year this was. I think was it last year?
It was the beginning of last season, I
Yeah,
think.
2019, February 7th. So, I think what the seven, I think the 76ers organization, I am concerned deeply about that organization in terms of growing talent and living up to the expectations and potential. I mean, right now, Joel Embiid seems to always be getting hurt now.
I
Ben
mean,
Simmons is still the same player that he was like 4 years ago. You got rid of some pretty good players. Like I think TJ McConnell, like I know you weren't going to pay a backup that much, but I did like his game. And I thought that he
Yep.
was like a good backup point guard for you guys, or for the 76ers fans, that is. Um, and so like the 76ers right now are looking kind of like the biggest fools in this trade in this trade because Markel Fultz, I think this was a great thing because he got traded away. The expectations of being the number 1 overall pick was gone. People were kind of like not paying attention to him, not checking him out so much. So he was able to recover and I think mentally get back to a place where it's like I am a good shooter or like I am a decent shooter where I can shoot the three. And obviously
Yeah.
he's shooting 30% right now, so not necessarily the best, but at least
But
he's starting
compared to a
taking
guy
them.
that couldn't shoot at all,
Yeah,
I mean, you take 30% over anything. At 30%,
more than
still
Ben
better than
Simmons.
Ben Simmons. Yeah.
Yep.
Still better than Ben. Like you're talking about a guy that's averaging 18.3 points, like quietly, 6 assists almost. The guy, dude, he's a great player. I like Markel a lot. And I'm happy to see Orlando is kind of lucked out for once. They're
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, like you go from a team, one of the most highly scrutinized teams in the league in the 76ers, definitely one of the most talked about teams, to easily a top 3. Nobody cares about this team. Like
Yeah.
do you know any Orlando Magic fans?
I can't even tell you who even like I think maybe my friend's brother Yannick, Brad, who's a regular on the channel, his brother I believe was a Magic fan, but I think it was just for Dwight Howard. And
Yeah,
that
there
was
you
like
go.
years
And
ago.
that was when they were a finals contender. And
Yeah.
everybody is going to be a bandwagon fan every so often. But it's just nice to see guys like Markel Fultz. And like I said, man, this guy to me, this is one of the very early, like, this guy is getting some buzz for this award
Mm-hmm.
rumors, talks where I kind of am falling for it. Like, I think that this is legit. Markel Fultz for most improved.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the thing. Like, I think if Markel Fultz can kind of maintain this type of 15 to 18 points per game, he could definitely be like a guy on your team that could be playing for you for 12 to 13 years in the NBA, be a
Mm-hmm.
solid point guard for you, and get you those clutch buckets, get you those clutch finishes. And so I think that's what I really like about this Orlando Magic team is not only Markel Fultz, but I think we have to look at to another guy that's kind of higher up the list in points per game, and that's Vucevic, man. Like Vucevic, this you're always going to get the same numbers for him. He's basically a 20 point, like 12 rebound type of guy, and I think really teams need to like. I really wish the Celtics would have looked for a trade. I think maybe the Magic are seeing themselves as like a playoff contending team. And so they're
Yeah.
like, you know what? We're not really going to try and move anybody. We're going to try and see what we can do with this roster. And right now, 4-0, although it is early in the season, this is still a great start to an NBA season. Like the fact that you're able to, in 4 games get 20 points per game from not only Vucevic, but you get it from a guy like Terrence Ross, who's not necessarily known to be like a 20 point per game scorer, but he's starting to, pick up his game a little bit. You got Evan Fournier, who's going to get you some solid minutes. Like everybody on the team is contributing. And that
Yes.
is, and this Magic team, I know that you're not a believer in them, but I think they are going to make the playoffs. And this is like my team that I have ahead of a team like the Wizards, which we talked about earlier in the stream.
Yeah, and I don't remember where I had the Magic before the season. I think I might have had them in the play-in, maybe. I don't think I did though. I I think they're definitely at the very least a play-in team now. And the last thing I have for the Magic in particular, I think this goes to show, dude, Steve Clifford is an underrated NBA coach. Can we agree on that?
They're very underrated. I think a
He's
lot of
one of
people
the
don't
most
look at him.
underrated coaches. Like he's easily one of the most underrated coaches because dude, the guy has been a good coach ever since he's been in the league. He's always been solid,
I think,
and
did
even
he
his bad
coach the
teams.
Bobcats?
Yes, yeah, he did when they were like not the worst team in the league too. He was getting decent seasons out of some of those guys. But yeah, man, I think Steve Clifford underrated coach. And if this team ends up like miraculously like a 5-6 seed, miraculously, I think that's a stretch to put them that high. But like, let's say for some reason they get that high, dude, he could have some serious contention in the coach of the year because this is a team that a lot of people expected to be at the bottom, not just me. This is a team that people expected to be at the bottom of the East, and they still might end up there. But if they keep these guys, I mean, Vucevic at this rate is not getting traded, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I
Why
said,
would
like
you
this.
trade him?
Yeah, this team is like looking to be a playoff team. If we look at Steve Clifford's history, 43-39 his first year as the Charlotte Hornets, or sorry, the Charlotte Bobcats, when they were called the Bobcats.
Yes.
But other than like a couple years, he went 33-49, 14-15, 48-34 the next year. Kind of like in this kind of like he wins about 40 games, but now that he's got like a decent team, he gets his team to the playoffs. He like I think with what I'm seeing from a guy like Steve Clifford is that like he's really like a guy that is very influential for his NBA players. And like you said, like I think that's the reason why like it was a good match made in heaven when you had a guy like Steve Clifford and Markelle Fultz, where they're together now. They can start kind of chilling, or not chilling, but more so like get in the flow, get in a rhythm, get his confidence up, and that's what you want in a coach. Like not
Yeah.
only the X's and O's where everybody kind of raves coaches, like that's I feel like that's where that's where people think that that's all the coaches do, but no, they have to do a lot of man management. And so
Oh,
when you
yeah.
have a guy like Steve Clifford who looks like he can do all those things, like the Magic team is looking pretty solid right now. Obviously, only 4 games in, not to be kind of like, oh my God, they're like the best team in the NBA, but they are a solid team. They're a great team. And I think with the way that the Orlando Magic are playing, they're definitely going to be in a playoff spot. I have them at 8 in my predictions because I just pulled it up on my notes app. I had them 8. But I think that they could be a pretty. I think they can move up and down, maybe to 6 if they even, depending on how the cards fall for them.
Yeah, dude, definitely, definitely. I've been very impressed with them, and just maximizing the potential of a lot of your players is, I think that's the most important skill of an NBA head coach, because whether or not you're maximizing an already incredible player or not, that's the dream, And I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's a huge gap, and I'm not trying to be a hater, and I know you're probably going to like this take and agree. There is a valley of difference in quality between what Steve Clifford can get out of his players, a guy like Steve Clifford, and a guy like Ty Lue, right? Is that fair to say? Just from a coaching perspective of X's and O's, Steve Clifford is going to get more out of your guys, more bang for your buck than a guy like Ty Lue ever will.
Yeah, I mean the only thing we've seen Tyronn Lue really coach is like a LeBron James team and now a Kawhi
Or
Leonard team.
why? Yeah, I
Um,
mean you're getting top 3 players every time you coach, and even then you're still borderline. Yeah, and he won the NBA Finals with the Cavs, but then instantly, I mean, they were an underperforming team. They were not good. So, dude, it's very interesting to see guys like Steve Clifford maximize underrated teams like the Magic, and get good stuff out of players. It'd be interesting to see what they end up doing with it. Are they going to take the trade value that some of these guys are building for themselves right now and capitalize on it? Like Terrence Ross is not going to get more value than what he has right now.
right.
So, do you keep him and have him come off as your sixth man, average the most points on your team, having never started a game this season? I would say it depends on what you're looking for. The Magic
Yeah.
probably are not looking to rebuild again. They've been rebuilding for 15 years. So
Yeah, they've been
why do
rebuilding
that?
ever since Dwight left and Hito Turkoglu and all that really good team. Jameer Nelson and all these other guys that they had like a pretty solid team, always made the playoffs, but never really made that big push. But one team that I kind of did want to talk about, Pete,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
this is going to be shocking to you, and I have it up on my screen as we were talking about the Magic. The Sacramento Kings right now are three
Oh,
and one.
you
Um,
read my notes.
and what I really like about it, and I liked him, and I don't understand why he was not a top 5 pick. I know the Bulls were looking for this type of point guard, and they didn't get him. Tyrese Halliburton right now is absolutely balling right now,
Yeah.
and
Rookie of the year front runner, in my opinion.
he's been playing so well for the Sacramento Kings, and the Sacramento Kings were probably laughing when he fell that far to them, and they're like, "All right, thanks," because this guy is really good. You have De'Aaron Fox, who's also playing very well. Do I have to issue an apology to Marvin Bagley? I don't think so, not just yet.
No, I don't think so.
He's kind of just going to be one of those guys that's not like maybe not a star, but definitely a very good player on the team. But like I said, Harrison Barnes has been balling out ever since he got that move to the Mavericks, and then moved over to the Sacramento Kings, and he's been kind of having a new breath of life. Buddy Hield coming off the bench, getting you 16. Kyle Guy, another guy that I really like on this team. Hassan Whiteside seems to have a new breath of life here, where he originally started. Corey Joseph, again, another solid player for them. But Tyrese
Mhm.
Halliburton, man, I really like his game. I think he's going to be a great player in this league. Averages about 50%. Averages about 3 points a game, like 3 pointers a game. And I really like his game, man. I think a lot of people are questioning whether or not the jump shot would translate into the NBA, but so
Yeah.
far he's looking very solid, man. I like this team.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it quite a bit, like leading up to the draft. Like, why is this guy not higher? Like, I didn't really understand it. And
Yeah.
I hate to always go to the Knicks, but like you look at a team like the Knicks, just is a great example. A team that's been historically bad at the point guard position for how many
Hmm.
years now? Why do you not look? Why were these teams not looking at Tyrese Halliburton as an instant fit when it seemed like that was what was going to happen, and now it is happening? Right?
Yeah.
Like it almost seemed obvious, like it was too obvious for these teams to miss it. And then they did it anyway. And then the guy falls out of the top 10 and he's already one of the best uh you know rookies, let alone just young players in the league. The guy has a 7.0 assist to turnover ratio. Like
That's
it's
really good.
crazy. It's crazy. I don't think it's the same now cuz they played last night, right?
Right.
But he was 15 to 1 assist to 1 turnover in his first 3 games. That's out of this world good, let alone for a rookie. That doesn't happen. He's
Hmm.
just running the offense in a way that is it's beautiful to watch. It's beautiful to watch. And they're the team I need to issue the biggest apology to. I don't even remember where I ranked the Kings, but I have a feeling that I said that they were either a play in team or a bottom tier team. I don't think that's true anymore. I don't. This is a start to this season that I've watched a couple of their games, and this seems sustainable to me.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this team really quick, like I see, like the Timberwolves drafted Anthony Edwards, looking pretty solid. Warriors drafted James Wiseman, pretty solid. The Hornets drafted Lamelo Ball. Here, although I do think the Lamelo Ball is going to be a good player in this league, the Hornets are just too like guard heavy at the moment to where I'm like he can make an impact on the team. But here with the Bulls, man, they drafted Patrick Williams. I understand that the talent could be Kawhi Leonard esque, but I think Halliburton just kind of showed you like why he is, kind of in the conversation for being an MVP, or sorry, not MVP, for a Rookie of the Year candidate. And what I find weird and what I find kind of interesting is that like the Bulls again are in the situation where they are just still looking for something, and I think they're gonna lose Zach LaVine and Laurie Market in this next year because if I'm one of those guys, why would I want to stay on this Bulls team that can't seem to build a solid roster? It seems like they're always kind of at the bottom tier. If we look at the Bulls kind of record right now where they're at, they I believe are 1-3. Obviously, we're only 4 games in, not to over panic, but like looking at their roster, like we look at the point guard position for depth. Kobe White, I'm not a big fan of him. I think that he's more of a scoring guard than really a point guard. And I think a guy like Tyrese Halliburton is kind of a combo of that. And I think that if you
Yeah.
have a taller, like if you want to kind of create like an OP kind of lineup, why would you not want to have like a guy like Zach LaVine and Tyrese Halliburton, two long, lankier guards who probably could play some pretty solid defense? Maybe not Zach LaVine so much, but Tyrese Halliburton could probably play a little bit more. And like you said with the assist to turnover ratio, man, like this guy screams that he should have been picked by the Chicago Bulls. And they
Yeah.
decided to go Patrick Williams, and we'll see if that pays off. He's a starter for them, starting over Otto Porter Jr., which is kind of sad for Otto Porter Jr.
Yeah, man. The fall off for that guy was pretty quick.
But yeah, man, I
Bummer.
mean, with the Chicago Bulls, it's that same song and dance with them, and I think that I don't think they're ever going to learn their lesson until that front office is kind of cleared of players and people that um, are probably not in the right position to get this team back to where it once was in the 90s, right? I think every Chicago fan right now is saying, how do we get back to the Michael Jordan era for the Chicago Bulls? And with the front office that they have right now, I don't think that they're going to be able to do it. And I know we kind of went from like a Sacramento Kings to like a Chicago Bulls crossover here. But I think it's very important to point out that that was a player that the Bulls could have had on their roster. And they,
He would have been a great fit for them too. And I think this is a good transition into the Bulls because we were talking about them the other night when that crazy ending to that Warriors game happened.
yeah,
Damian Lee hit the three to win. Right before that, Zach LaVine had hit a pretty nice jumper. I think he might have been a floater actually. He ran into the deep two range and put one in to put them over the top with maybe like 5 seconds left, and then obviously Damian Lee hits that three.
mm-hmm.
I think this is a good question because you and I were texting that night about Zach LaVine in particular. I think he's part of the problem, man. I just don't see Zach LaVine as like a winning player. He might be in the ranking of good stats, but doesn't translate to a winning record players in the league currently. I think he's number one for me personally.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's not, you're not wrong on that. I think it's very hard to argue right now whether or not Zach LaVine is a guy that you want to trade for, is a guy that you want on your roster. Because when I look at Zach LaVine, he's played from Minnesota and Chicago. Obviously, we know the draft night he just did not want to play for this Chicago Bulls team, or sorry, not Chicago Bulls, this Minnesota team. And he's gotten his scoring average up every year since he's been in the league, but
Mhm.
I think what you're saying, man, is that like even look at this. So in in 2015, he played 77 games, 15, 16, 82. Then it seems like once he got to 16 all the way to 2021, I'm not even going to count last year because that was obviously like the COVID year. And so, you're not going to play a lot of, like, we still had like a month left of games. But like he has yet to play over 70 games, like even starting or being games played like off the bench. Like, and that to me is a big concern if I'm an NBA team. It's like, am I going to be relying on Zach LaVine to stay healthy enough to get me to where we need to go? Like, I understand, like, with Zach LaVine, I think defensively you're not going to get much from him. Offensively is probably where your best bet is. But I think he would be a better, like, could you maybe, like, I don't know how much Zach LaVine's trade value is worth, but maybe, do you think it's the same as like a guy like Kyle Kuzma, or do you think it's a little bit more than that?
I think purely based on numbers, it's a little bit more. It's more value. Uh, I don't know. I think my biggest thing with Zach LaVine that I think of, and this is my, tell me if I'm stupid. Tell me if this is a goofy reason. Okay.
Okay.
I think he's a cultural problem to me, and
Oh,
not like he causes a ton of problems with the team, but I just don't necessarily think he is the best fit for like a winning mentality on a team. And I think part of that is he's very stats oriented. Like what he looks for in his game is his numbers. And I think my reasoning behind that is when you look at a guy who scores as many points as Zach LaVine does, yet some of his most viral clips in the league that people have seen are all him either complaining on the court like that. Do you remember that game when he had, I think he had 40 points in the fourth quarter, not just in the fourth quarter, obviously, but he was at like 44 points, something like that.
yeah.
And then there's a clip of him on the court where they were trying to take him out, and he's like, he says an expletive, and he's like, I have 40 effing points, right? And then they lose. I think they lost the game, right? It's like this guy is looking for numbers. He's looking for numbers. And if this guy had more desire in the league to have him, it would have happened already. It would have happened because they've been awful for years with him, and he's still putting up these mega numbers, and it just doesn't mean anything. It never amounts to anything more than good numbers. So I don't know. I think he's a great. I wouldn't let Markkinen leave, but Levine, I'd let him go.
Wow.
I'd let him go. He's just going to demand. It's going to be a much higher price tag than he's worth, purely because of the numbers. Like he averages a high amount of points, so the stat sheet builds up, and then people's paycheck gets higher. So whether or not that ever is going to amount to winning, I don't think so. But I'd be interested to hear what people in the chat think about Zach LaVine. I think he is one of the more polarizing guys in the league, though. You either think he's much better than he is, or like me, you think he's much worse than maybe he actually is.
Yeah, I mean, like when I think of a guy like Zach Levine, I think like what you're saying could be right, right? Where he's kind of like a locker room problem, not in terms of like he's like, out there like a James Harden or anything like that, but more so like very me or and maybe we can talk about this because this was the kind of topic I wanted to bring up to you. And kind of talking about this generation of players. Um, is that like he's very into like like you said the numbers, he's into getting his points per game up, he's into getting like his all of his stats up across the board.
Mhm.
And I think that I think that if he changes his mindset, I think he could be a very solid player in this league, and he could be like a second or third best player next to a superstar and actually contribute very well to them.
Yeah.
The question for me, and like you said, it's the case of a bad, it's a case of a good player, bad team type of mentality, where like you had a guy like Kevin Love who was getting all these rebounds, getting all these points, and everyone's like, oh man, like if Kevin Love had a better team, he'd be doing so much better. But we see that those points per game drastically go down. We see that the rebounds per game drastically go down because you're no longer asked to be the number one guy. And that to me is where I'm a little concerned. Like if you're Zach Levine, like if you go to a team where you're expected to be the number two or number three guy, do those stats that he shows, like those 20 points per game,
Mhm.
3 assists a game and almost 4 rebounds a game, like do those drastically go down for him? Because
Yeah.
he's more of a guard that doesn't like he likes to create his own shot. He's not going to be a guy that catches and shoots. Like he's always known that he's got to dribble and pull up jumpers and all this other stuff, dunking and all this other things. And he is, yeah, Sean, you're all right. Zach Levine is a Bothell High School legend.
Yeah, local guy.
Local.
And that's part of my defense for my Zach Levine take. I've always been a huge supporter of him. Like local kid, I think when we were in high school, he was in high school, right?
Yep.
Not that far away, like in our neighborhood, basically. So I've always been rooting for this guy. It's just the mere fact that when I watch him play, he seems like if he gets a 40-point game and they lose and they're 20 and 43, he's okay with that, you know? And to me, that is never going to amount to a guy that's going to be a leader for a good team. And I think that's where the Bulls are. Like I don't know, man. You have a guy that puts up numbers, but is it ever going to amount to anything, let alone even just making the playoffs? But are you going to win a playoff series with Zach Levine as your best player? No way. No way. He's not leading anybody. He's just like out there to get numbers. And I know we've talked about the Bulls for a long time for a 1-3 team that's definitely going to be a bottom 5 team in the league, but they are one of the more famous franchises in the league, and this has been their best player for multiple seasons now. So it's interesting to see like their commitment to him as their
Mm-hmm.
best player. It's weird more than anything to me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there because I mean, when I look at their roster and I see like you have guys like Ryan Arachne, whatever I can't even pronounce this game. Arachne,
Oh yeah,
the whatever that guy's name.
arachnophobia.
Yeah, the arachnophobia. You got Wendell Carter Jr., who I had high hopes for him. He's still kind of like the same player that he was a couple years back. You got, Chandler Hutchinson, who I actually like. I don't think he's been really getting that much run, really. I mean, he's only,
13 minutes.
I don't know if he's been hurt. I mean, he's active. Like, I liked him. I'm not sure why he's not playing as much. Zach Levine, obviously, their guys, Larry Marketing, they're trying to kind of re-sign him and get him on a long-term extension. And then you had some idiotic moves, and like I know that Otto Porter Jr. is not a bad player in this league. He averaged what he's averaging right now, 16 points per game, doing this thing. But
After what?
Woj, I need you to be quiet, Woj. Um,
Woj.
but basically, man, these ESPN need to work on this. Stop auto playing stop auto playing videos. But like you look at his stats. 13, 11, 12, 17, 14. Like you're not getting, to be honest, you're not getting the value I feel like of a guy like
He's your highest paid player too, right?
highest paid player getting you about 28 million a
It's
year.
crazy. Crazy.
You're not getting the value of him. Like obviously the value of his thing was that he's one of the best 3-point shooters out there, right? Especially when the Washington Wizards signed him, which is probably one of their biggest mistakes.
Hmm.
And he never lived up to that expectations of a contract. That was the crazy year. I believe it was like 2016, 2017, or maybe that 15-16 season where everybody and their mama was getting like the craziest NBA contract you could ever think of. And you had people that were like, is this like, is this trend going to continue? And it didn't. And the Wizards and now the Chicago Bulls have to live with the big contract on them, and I'm not sure when it's over. I'm probably maybe in a couple years, maybe one or two more. Um, but they definitely need to start looking to trade him or get rid of his contract and maybe try and bring in somebody, which I'm not sure if anybody will. But with this team, like Patrick Williams, I don't think he's been playing particularly too well. He's kind of been playing like like average, really. I mean, if we look at his stats really quick, for the rookie, shooting about 15.
Playoff.
All right, again, autoplay videos. Um, like 43% from the field, not doing too well. 7 turnovers right now with almost a 2 turnover per game. That's not what you need from your rookie, especially someone who's
Yeah.
not playing the point guard position. You got shooting 50% from the 3-point land is not bad. But he's I don't think I'm necessarily getting like the best out of him. For a guy that's supposed to be the Kawhi Leonard, or like your new Kawhi Leonard, or someone that could be Kawhi Leonard-esque. I don't think that
Hmm.
this is necessarily the right guy. And like I said, I would have rather taken Halliburton for this reason, because I think Halliburton is a proven scorer and is really good defensively. The assist to turnover ratio is really good, and especially for Kobe White, I don't see him as a point guard. I see him more as a scoring guard, and so for me, that's kind of where I'm at with this Bulls team. And I know we've kind of talked about this for ad nauseum right now about Chicago, for a team like you said that's probably going to be in the
Yeah.
bottom 5. But like you said, they are a well-respected franchise for all the championships they won, with probably one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And they still
Yeah.
haven't amounted to even sniffing the playoffs since Derrick Rose left.
100%. The legacy is just, I don't know. Year by year, I feel like it gets tarnished more and more with Zach LaVine being your best player, and just ugly fit of team chemistry is just, I don't know, man. They're a bummer to me. They're a bummer. Let's go to another team, man. I got another interesting team that I was much higher on than you, and this is going to be my counter to the Sacramento Kings, where I apologize to them for how much I underrated
Okay.
them going into this season.
Okay.
I am going to do the flip side with a team where I definitely overrated them. The Toronto Raptors.
The Toronto
Definitely
Raptors, huh?
definitely overrated Toronto, but not for the reasons. I still stand by Nick Nurse. I think Nick Nurse is easily a top 5 coach in the league. Easily. However, when your best player is Pascal Siakam, which he's definitely their best player, and he has been a different man since the bubble. He has been a different player. Because I think, just like I was in this camp last season, he was unreal in the regular season before COVID struck and the league had to stop. He was unreal. Very solid. People were mind blown that this was continuing after Kawhi had left. They won the championship, and then, now we're instantly going into rebuild mode, and that just wasn't the case. However, Kyle Lowry is now 35 years old, definitely on the other side of the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I struggle to see how this team is gonna shake off this 0-3 start. I don't want to overreact and say they're awful and not going to make the playoffs. I still think this is a playoff team, but this has now become my number one. This is a big trade waiting to happen team, and I think that they're my number one sleeper pick for getting Harden. I think.
I was gonna say, like, I think this was kind of a team that I also looked at that maybe could get Bradley Beal as well. Um,
Yep.
they definitely do need to make some moves. I feel like, Pascal Siakam, like you said, being your star player. Obviously, I don't think that he is like a number one guy on the team. I think that OG Anunoby right now is playing pretty well for their team. But like you said, you have an aging Kyle Lowry who's like 34 years old. You have that's basically really it. And then you have what's his name? Fred VanVleet also getting paid a little bit of good change, a good pocket of change.
Yep.
You got a guy like Malachi Flynn, who you drafted, who you thought was going to, make an impact for you. When you bring in guys like Stanley Johnson, Patrick McClaw, and just like all these other players, it's just like
Alex Len, who's
Alex
not an
Lynn.
awful player.
You expected a guy like Nick Nurse to get the most out of this team, but I'm just not really seeing the value right now of this Toronto Raptors team. Like, I like, who do you trade? Like, obviously, you're gonna have to trade a guy like Kyle Lowry and Fred Van Vliet.
Siakam.
And
Siakam's got to go too.
you're thinking you're done with Siakam. The Siakam train is over.
Dude, that Celtics series was like eye-opening to me in the bubble. Toronto and the Celtics. Siakam. I don't know if I've seen a player get exposed more than he did in that series in years. I don't think so. Because people were, over the moon for him. And then that Celtics series, they were hardly even guarding him sometimes. They just weren't concerned with him, even in the
Right.
slightest. And they definitely didn't double him. And if you're considered the best player on your team in what should be, a year where you're still evolving into, a prime player in this league, you just can't get exposed that bad. You just can't, especially if the other best player on your team is 35-year-old Kyle Lowry. You just have to be better. And I think right now, I'm might. I can hear me now. What's going on?
Oh, you good?
Oh yeah, it's gone now. I just heard me for a second. I just think he's, man. I hate to overreact. I'm not the type to make big rash decisions 3 games into the season, but I think that this is a continuing trend for him, and I think that maybe he was riding off of that season, and the confidence was so high that he was overperforming. And I think with a guy like Pascal, I don't think his trade value is going up anytime soon. So make a move. Like you said, Beal, I would trade for him number 1, but I think it's Harden is much more realistic for them because you could put a package together to get Harden with what they have.
Okay.
Oh, man. I
Yeah.
would do it. I would do it in a second. You have to capitalize on a good coach like Nick Nurse. You have to capitalize if you're going to be able to keep Lowry. You have another season or maybe 2 with him. And then you just signed Fred Van Vliet to a big contract. Not the biggest contract. It wasn't the max, obviously, but it was still a big contract. You have to capitalize on that stuff. So I don't know. And maybe Van Vliet's part of that trade. He probably has to be.
What about
Siakam, Van Vliet,
what
and
do you
some
think?
picks.
What do you think
I'd
about
do it.
OG? You think OG goes?
I'd keep him. I'd keep him.
Yeah, I mean OG.
Dude, I like their pieces. I like their team. I think they were like my maybe 3rd or 4th seed. I wish I had mine written down like you do. But they were up there for me based on the Nick Nurse value. Like I think he gives you like an actual noticeable difference on the court just from pure coaching.
Yeah.
But if your
Man.
best player on your team is underperforming to the level, right now, Pascal Siakam's PER, which I know PER is a little outdated. People don't like it as much as they used to. It's 9.61. That's awful.
Yep.
That's awful. He has a 1.3 assist to turnover ratio. That is not good enough. That is not good. And if the trend continues and his confidence is as broken as it appears to be, you have to move from him now. If you can get a good guy like a great guy like Harden or Beal back, move from him now. Just do it.
Yeah, I mean, like what I'm seeing right now from this Raptors team is that they need to make some adjustments. They need to make some moves because right now, like I don't know if this is exposing Nick Nurse as like this like offensive genius. Obviously, he like last season was different. Like the team looked pretty good. They looked pretty solid. But man, this season is really like it's almost kind of like the same thing that happened to Brad Stevens a little bit, where it's like, you could be the greatest X's and O's guy, but I just didn't think that that Nick Nurse is getting the most out of his guys right now. I don't know whether it's because they're playing in Miami, they're not like familiar with the area. They obviously have to rent homes or rent hotel rooms to live in for the next couple months because obviously the Canada border between the U.S. And Canada is shut down. Shout out Skepta. But this is just kind of one of those things where it's like right now, like they need to start, they need to start winning. Like I thought last night was going to spark their winning streak or like spark it because this 76ers team, I'm not a big believer in. So I really thought that they could, take advantage of the situation, get back to winning ways. But right now, what I'm not seeing is the confidence of what happened last year from the Raptors. One game away from going to the Eastern Conference Finals, and we're seeing the same old Raptors who I think they need to perform better. Obviously, I think that's no secret. That's like a duh moment. But what can you do? You've already paid
Yeah.
Pascal Siakam so much money. Is a team going to be willing to take that contract? Is a team going to be willing to uh, deal with Pascal Siakam as their number one guy if they trade for Pascal Siakam? And I just don't think that
Well,
I don't think that there's a
yeah.
team that wants to have Pascal Siakam as their number one. Like I don't know what happened in the bubble, but he just forgot how to dribble. I don't know
Oh,
how that
dude.
happens, but he just forgot how to dribble the basketball, and that's why
No,
the
no,
Raptors lost
no
that
player had a
Celtics
worse
series.
bubble. Yeah, no player had a worse bubble than Pascal did. And
Maybe
to me,
Kemba.
it's not even close. No, I don't even think it's close, man. I don't even think it's close. Kemba wasn't great. Obviously, it didn't go very well for him.
Mm-hmm.
But Pascal Siakam went from a guy that people had such high hopes for in terms of like, this guy is really working towards something.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I mean, he was a liability in the utmost sense of the term. Like he was
Right.
a liability on the court at all times in that series, and that cannot be your highest paid 24 or 26-year-old player. That can't be him. So, man, I just think you got to move from him. I've been so disappointed in them more than any other team in the league so far.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely need to start stepping up. They need to start winning because if they don't, they're going to be in some serious trouble when it comes to, uh, you know, when when crap hits the fan, to put it lightly. You got to start making some better adjustments. And so, we'll see if Nick Nurse can kind of do it. I don't want to say I don't believe that Nick Nurse can, but what I am concerned with about Nick Nurse is that I just don't think he has the pieces around him to really do what he wants to do. And so,
Yeah.
OG Awanobi, I think, is growing into that role. I've liked his game. I think he's really stepped up for the Raptors. But other than that, it's really just been quiet from Toronto right now, and they're
No,
bottom of the league right now, and so they're gonna need to start figuring out like what to do as they continue to move forward. Um,
yes.
and so I kind of want to go over one more team, at least for me, and then if you have any other teams, Pete, we can kind of talk about it. I want to talk
Yep.
about the Portland Trailblazers. You
Let's do
know,
it.
the Portland Trailblazers right now are 2-1. They're first in the Northwest Division. That includes teams like Denver Nuggets, Timberwolves,
Utah.
Oklahoma City,
Utah.
Utah. Right now, they're tied with Utah for the record for first in the division. Obviously, I think Utah's the tiebreaker if I'm not mistaken. And so they lost the first game by a lot. Everyone was kind of like, "Oh, they're done," and I was included in that. Pete, do you believe that
Yeah.
this Portland Trailblazers team can be a contender for the NBA playoffs?
I think they can. I do. I like this team a lot. And I hate to always be the guy. I have my things that when I look at a team that has potential to actually do something and compete in a 7-game series, one of my number one things, I said this already today, is like, do you have 8 to 9 guys that can play on the court, right?
Right.
They 100% do, right? CJ, Dame, Gary Trent Jr. is awesome. Love Gary Trent Jr. Cantor is questionable in a big game. Like, I wouldn't play him because he's so bad on defense.
Mm-hmm.
But Nurkic, 100%, and I still think he's getting back to what he used to be before his horrific leg injury.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Carmelo has only played 2 games because of COVID. He missed the first game, I believe it was the first game. Um, Derrick Jones Jr. is solid. Robert Covington, obviously, as people think very highly of him as a role player. And then you have guys like Rodney Hood is like your 10th, 11th guy off the bench. Like, that's a solid player to have that deep into your rotation. I really like Portland. I hope they make a trade because I think their guards it's just too crowded in the guard area.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily want to stake my claim on which one of them I think should get moved. I think everybody defaults to CJ, and obviously not Dame. Like, let's be honest, they're nothing without Dame.
Yeah.
But whether or not it's CJ McCollum or Gary Trent Jr., who also has pretty solid value, I would say, I think one of those guys is going to have to get moved if this team really wants to compete deep into the playoffs. But I like this team, man. I like them. They have a lot of guys that you can put out there in a big game that are going to actually be able to do something. So I like it, man.
Yeah, I mean, this team is good, but I don't think that they're necessarily the best, right? Like, I think with this team, what I notice about them is that defensively, they are just as liable as these other teams that we talked about previously. Like, CJ and Dame are not going to play a lick of defense because that's not their game. Their game is mostly offensive, and you need to be good on both sides of the ball. And I feel like nobody on this team, besides maybe Derrick Jones Jr. as a defender, and even Gary Trent Jr. a little bit, but I would say Derrick Jones Jr. more specifically. It's probably one of your better defenders on your team. Covington is kind of for me. Like he's a guy that's he's not aggressive. He's not aggressive enough, like on both sides of the ball. And then you got a guy made of tissue paper in Zach Collins who got injured once again and is going to be out, I believe. Let's look at this story really quick. I have it here on Real GM. He's out indefinitely with an ankle surgery. Like he just got ankle surgery. He's gonna, he underwent the surgery like September 1st and now is out indefinitely. Like it is just looking bad for Zach Collins right now.
It's unfortunate too because he's shown lots of flashes of like this guy actually kind of fits the league perfectly right now, but man, he just can't stay healthy.
And I like when I look at this Portland Trailblazers roster, I do like some of their pieces. Like I do think that CJ Ellerby will be a decent player for them at some point when he gets his chance to shine. But kind of what I'm looking at here, Yusuf Nurkic, I don't necessarily think he's going to get back to the way that he once was. I understand that he's kind of like slowly trying to get back to that, but I'm not necessarily seeing it. Anthony Simons, I think that he's kind of a guy that still needs to grow and develop. I'm not a believer in this team. I think that they're going to fall just short of the playoffs and maybe have to do the play-in game. Because
I think that's pretty harsh. I think they're definitely a top 6 seed in the West.
Where do I have them at in my notes?
I think they're definitely 6. Maybe number 7, but I don't think they're playing. I think they're better than that.
I think I had them at 6, I think, in my predictions.
Is there any more? Maybe it's just me in the places I look at NBA news and rumors and things that people are talking about. I don't think there's any underlying storyline in the league that I find more annoying than Anthony Simons is the next big thing. Do you see that other places like I do? Like people talking about,
I do see it on. I think I see it like on The Athletic, especially because that when you're a fan of a certain team, those type of stories do pop up a little bit more.
Yeah. So it's just like, would the guy not be getting more minutes at this point if he was that good?
Yeah, he probably would be.
Why is he only playing 7 minutes a game if he's that good? That is my biggest thing with the Trailblazers. Like, if he actually has that much upside and value, why do you have him? Like, what's the point of having him?
Right.
Is he just he's gonna ride the pine for the first half of his career and then all of a sudden be a superstar? Like, what's your end game with this kid? Like, turn Dame's career into something with another piece, or stop. And maybe that's their point. Maybe it's just like propaganda to build up his value without having to play him a bunch. But I'm just tired of hearing it. If the guy is that good, play him. What's the point? That's my big thing with him. You have him, use him.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, like at this point right now, Anthony Simons is 21 years old. I would probably say give it this year, and then next year you have to see whether or not this kid's got something. Because you can only live on potential for so long until one day you're like 24, 25 years old, and then you're like, crap, I have to, this kid may not be the next whatever. I was kind of the same thing with Brandon Ingram, right? We remember like Brandon Ingram, like we always thought there was like growth and potential with him. Like every year, he kind of disappointed each and every year for the Lakers. And then once, and maybe we can talk about that because I think there is a story about how those trade rumors did affect Brandon Ingram. Um,
Yeah.
but we saw what happened um, when Brandon Ingram went to a different team. Like he was like a new player. Like we saw like, damn, this guy could actually be a pretty good player in this league. And so maybe Anthony Simons needs to do the same thing. Go to a different team, or the Blazers have to start playing him. But the problem is that because he plays the guard position, unless they're going to get rid of CJ McCollum, unless they're going to get rid of Damian Lillard, which I do not see happening anytime soon, not with Damian Lillard at least. CJ may be a different story.
Yeah.
I think you got to start looking at maybe trading him or start playing him at a small forward position because I believe he's 6'3". So I mean that's going to be tough because all your guards right now you have, like I said, you have a guy like in Dame who's like 6'1", I believe, or 6'2", CJ 6'3", and then Anthony Simons who's 6'3". I think you have to start playing him some role minutes, see if he can do something, and if he can't, then I think you need to start looking for a new player or start looking for rumors.
Just a better fit. Just a better fit in general. Like if you're not going to use this guy, why do you have like such a highly touted guard, riding the pine so much? What's the point?
Yeah.
I do have one more team I want to talk about underperforming so far, and I think like maybe overperforming their record quietly, even though people think very highly of them, is the Denver Nuggets. One
The
and three.
Nuggets. Yeah.
How are you feeling about this Nuggets team?
I think they're just fine. I mean, Jokic right now is kind of dominating the stats right now with his points, rebounds, assists, steals. Jamal Murray is kind of falling down a little bit, down to earth. He had such a crazy NBA playoffs that now it's like there was so much expectation for him to kind of keep up the same production. But now we're seeing a guy like Michael Porter Jr. who's kind of taking over the points per game for him, which you never saw before. And I think Jamal Murray right now is just, I think he needs to get back to the fundamentals. And Jamal Murray is a great point guard, but what I'm not seeing from him is really, I'm not really seeing the same Jamal Murray that we got in the bubble. And I think teams are kind of adjusting to his game. They're adjusting. They've done the coaching changes. They have adjusted their lineups to kind of make sure that they stop this kid. And so I think Jamal Murray right now is kind of falling down to earth, and obviously he didn't play one of the games. And I think he needs to start picking his workload up because right now it's not looking too good for him. And again, Gary Harris, 31 minutes and only giving you 9.3 points a game. That's not going to cut it for him. They're going to have to look to trade him.
Yeah, man, this is an interesting team. I mean, you have Jokic is literally leading their team in every statistic except blocks, which he's not far behind. Guy's averaging a triple-double so far. This team is going to ride obviously on Jamal Murray's success and whether or not he can turn this season around because he's averaging less than 40% from the field.
Yeah,
39.5 field goal percentage, that's god awful. That's terrible for a player of his caliber.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not, this is my big question for this team. I brought up the Bradley Beal trade, like this would be a great fit for them earlier. And they've come up a lot in the rumors for guys like Harden, just, trades in general, people talking about the Nuggets. What are they going to do with Michael Porter Jr.? Do you think there's any question whether or not they're playing a certain amount of games into this season to determine whether or not they'd ride it out with Michael Porter Jr. or Jamal Murray? Is it even a question which one they'd rather have? Because everybody defaults to let's trade Michael Porter Jr. for somebody, right? But I think it's a bigger question than people are giving it credit for. Like Jamal Murray is so inconsistent. He's so inconsistent.
Michael Porter Jr. has to stay. Like I
don't see how he's a trade piece anymore. He's too good.
The potential for like being the next Kevin Durant, which is what they deemed him as, like we're looking right now at a guy that's almost averaging 20 points a game, almost 7 rebounds a game with the two, with 3.5 assist to turnover. So the decision making is still not there for him. But this guy is too
Better
good
though.
for me to where you can get rid of him. I honestly like. I know that Jamal Murray is struggling right now, but like he doesn't add any value besides scoring. Like assists is only getting you 2 assists a game. Like he's really looking to get his because Jokic is really being the point guard of the team. Like
Mhm.
the guy that facilitates the offense, gets the offense going. That's Jokic. Meanwhile, you have a guy like in Jamal Murray who went off, who was like absolutely like a flamethrower in the playoffs. But now what we're seeing from them is like they're starting to get a little bit more quieter. That being Jamal Murray. Guys like Gary Harris who played well. I mean, let's look at Gary Harris's stats from like the years past. I mean, we look at kind of what happened to him. Like, there was a season in like the 17-18 season where he was averaging 17.5 points per game.
Yeah.
And each
I
and
made a
every
video about him that year.
and each and every year, the points per game keeps going down. The field goal percentage keeps going, 40, 45 right now, but it keeps going down from like that 17-18 season. 30, the 3-point percentage keeps going down. I think
Yeah.
you got to start looking to get rid of Gary Harris. Like he has obviously shown that he is not quite what you need for a third superstar. Obviously, now the team is looking at a guy like Michael Porter Jr., Jokic, and Jamal Murray to be the three-headed monster of this team. Like I'm okay if Gary Harris kind of accepts his role as being like the fourth option, kind of the spot up shooter, but he is not doing a good enough job 3-point percentage wise. He's shooting
Yeah.
17.6% this season. That is worse than god awful. Like that, you can get probably one of us to go shoot threes and we'll at least make 20%.
Yeah, I'm
And
god awful. I'd probably be a little bit better than that.
it's just like, I'm not, criticizing Gary Harris in terms of like, his personality or anything like that, but more so like the play is just not good enough to warrant him being, I would honestly say, a starter on the team.
Yeah, yeah, man. I mean that might be harsh, but in this, it might be, and this is the reason I wanted to talk about the Nuggets, which is Jamal Murray in particular. I feel very similarly, but also it's different at the same time with him and Siakam. Two guys that were kind of coming into their own right around the same age last season, and they had very different opposite bubbles. Jamal Murray significantly out kicking his coverage, outperforming what he's normally doing in the bubble. Siakam significantly underperforming what he's usually doing. And I think that these two guys are both kind of coming down in trade value. Like they might be the biggest droppers so far in the league in terms of what they're worth on the court over the last 6 months. And when you look at what you have in Jokic, I mean, you have, dude, there's not many guys in the league that are more offensively impactful to what the league is right now than Jokic. Like that's fairly obvious. The guy is maybe not only the best passing big man in the league, he might be one of the best passers in the entire league. Like he's probably in the top 10, right? Fair to say.
Yeah.
He's averaging the most assists in the league right now, or close to it. I think you got to move from Murray, man. You got to capitalize on what you have with Jokic, and you can't waste the potential that this guy brings to your team with an inconsistent number 2 player. And
I
Jamal
mean,
Murray is a guy that I don't know if he's ever going to reach the heights that he was at in that bubble in terms of value. So I think they're a top contender to make another big move too. I think they should as well.
yeah, I mean, you got to start looking at like the potential of each guy. I believe Jokic is either 24 or 25 years old right now. You got Murray, I think is like 26 or 27, if I'm not mistaken.
He's
Oh, no,
younger
he's
than that.
23. He's 23,
Yeah,
sorry. Like he's 23, you got Porter Jr.'s 21. So I think like what I'm seeing here is that I think you could probably ride out this season and see whether or not you can turn it around. And then next season, I think, is when you make the big move and make the big splash to see like, okay, Jamal Murray's only 23 years old. Can he, at 24, 25, can we get the Jamal Murray that we know and love? And so I think I'd give it another season. But I do think that they need to start making a move for a guy like Gary Harris. They need to get him off the roster, get another guy that can really fit their scheme, fit their system, and a guy that's going to be more of a spot up shooter, because I feel like that's kind of what they're missing at this point, is a guy that can
That's
really make
exactly.
who can make an impact in the shooting ways. You know, you got guys like Will Barton, who I really like, but he's not like a spot up shooter the way that I think a lot of us think of him as. And so I think that's where this team really needs to start looking at is who can be the next guy to give us some great buckets as a spot up shooter, a guy that can not only take it off the dribble but be a spot up shooter as well. And so you need to start looking right now at what you can get for a guy like Gary Harris.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't think he's worth anything, really. I think they're the second team to me. Like, I think Toronto's number one. This team needs to make a move. They should make a move. Boston is probably number two. And then I think the Nuggets are three. I think they are.
Nuggets at
I
three,
just hate
okay.
when if you have a team with, or should I say a player with the potential to be dominant like Jokic is
Right.
every single night. I don't see where it makes sense to ride out any season. Like, you shouldn't be riding out any season. You should be going to win the title every year. Like, I can hear me again, by the way.
Jeez. I don't know what's going on.
I just don't think you can waste years from a guy like Jokic, especially in a market like Denver. Like, you need to capitalize on that, and you need to put him around guys that can win effectively at the same level that he can. So take the guy that has the most value on your team right now in Murray that you actually would want to trade more so than Jokic, and do something with him. Turn him into a Bradley Beal. I would do it if I was them. You're not sacrificing youth all that much. Bradley Beal is only 4 years older, and he is 10 times more consistent than Jamal Murray is. So I don't know, man. I think it's an interesting. They're in kind of a conundrum of this team has the potential to be a top two seed year in and year out as long as they have Jokic, but that will completely hinge on who their number two player is, and it probably. I am starting to lean more and more into that being Michael Porter Jr. I don't know, man. There's not many more guys offensively that I watch, and like, this guy is talented to the point where you need to give him as many shots as you can. Just give him
Yeah.
more shots.
I mean, we'll see with the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, it's only 4 games in. You know, we're always, kind of overreacting to things, and we're always, overreacting in both ways, right? You know, we talked about a couple teams that are 4-0 right now. We talked about the Magic. We talked about the Nuggets. Like, I think we have to give it at least 20 games to kind of see where everything falls in lines. And I think that's the amount of games I think the Nuggets are going to look at and see, like, okay, Jamal Murray's being very inconsistent right now. He's not being the guy that we once drafted or the guy that was in the bubble last year. And so I think you got to give it at least 20 games to kind of see where everything's at.
Yeah.
Because right now, like you said, Jokic is kind of dominating the stat line right now, leading everything besides blocks. And we know that Jokic, not necessarily the best defender, but more of a shifty, crafty defender, I would say. And so, we'll see what happens with the Denver Nuggets. And if you guys are Nuggets fans in the comment section, or if you guys are live with us in the chat, let us know what you guys think of the Denver Nuggets. Are they a team that you could see potentially trading away some of their players to get a guy like James Harden or Bradley Beal? Or do you think that they should stay the course and see what they can do with this team? And Pete, I think we need to talk about one more team, and I don't want to get any disrespect because I know fans of this team will definitely be heated if I don't talk about them. The Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
3-1. Right now, Victor Oladipo playing very well. You got Domantas Sabonis playing absolutely insane. This team, to me, is looking pretty scary. I don't think I had them. If I look at my notes really quick, yeah, I didn't have them making the playoffs this year. And right now they're 3-1 in the Central Division, and in that division you have teams like the Bucks, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, and we all know the Bucks are like the cream of the crop. But the fact that they are first in the division by a couple games in, this team to me is a well-balanced team. I like all their pieces. I think Malcolm Brogdon is proving to be a pretty damn good player for them. I mean, we're seeing right now that he's averaging about, I believe, 20 points per game. You got Sabonis who's averaging 21, 11, and 7.3 assists for a center. This is the guy the Celtics should definitely trade for, but that's another story for another time.
I don't, dude.
Um,
I don't know if they have the pieces to even get him. The way he's playing, I
I know
just
that's
don't
what I'm
see it.
saying. Like we should have traded for him at the beginning of the season. But you got Victor Oladipo, who's they're gonna ease him a little bit back into games. They don't want to force anything too quickly. But I really like this team, man. I think this team. I kind of downplayed him a little bit because I thought that they were going to start rebuilding, start trying to say, Victor Oladipo, we want you to go to a team where you're going to win a championship, and we're going to start drafting players for this next coming season. But they've decided to go in a completely different direction, and it's worked out well for them. TJ Warren, I think a lot of people had high expectations for him to kind of continue the bubble, but I always kind of thought he was like that 15 to 18 point per game scorer where like he's a good player, but he's not like a superstar or all-star player like a Victor Oladipo. And I think
Yeah, definitely not.
and I think that's where TJ Warren kind of fits in, and he's fitting in pretty well for the team. Miles Turner right now coming off I believe, well, he's starting, but I think that he's a pretty good player. Averaging about 15 points per game, or sorry, not 15, 11.3 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, a little bit low, but I believe 5 blocks a game. So, when you have a block shot, center like he and like Rudy Gobert are, it definitely helps out your defense so much. And so
Yeah.
I like this team, man. I think that they're one of those teams where maybe I regret not putting them in a playoff spot.
I think I had them very low, but in the playoffs, like the 8th seed, if I remember correctly. And I think that's too low in the East. Now that I look at this team a little bit closer, like if Sabonis continues to just grow as much as he has already, he's he's definitely in consideration for a lower All NBA team, right? I think that's pretty fair to say, like third
Yeah.
team All NBA. If you have a guy of that caliber and then Oladipo continues to come back at the pace that he is, and he's still on a minutes restriction too, relatively speaking. Um, Under 30 minutes a game for Oladipo, and he's already sat out a game too.
Yeah.
Man, this team is they're a tough. They're going to be a tough out for a lot of people in the East, a lot of teams in the East, because and it goes back to my criteria. If you have T.J. McConnell as your 8th guy off the bench, like you're doing something right with the way you're composing your team. Like he is a good player on most teams, let alone an 8th guy. He's solid. And then you have both the Holidays, Doug McDermott, who's actually been looking pretty nice so far this season. I love Doug
Doug
McBuckets, but
Doug McBuckets, baby.
dude, he has been pretty nice coming off the bench this season. TJ Warren is actually like underperformed too. So they're 3-1 with him not playing very well. He's averaging actually only a 52% field goal percentage. And like, I watch every Knicks game front to back. That first game they played against the Knicks, TJ Warren was the worst player on the court. He was the worst player on either team. And that's saying a lot because the Knicks have they got some real bad ones that play on the court, and he was that bad, and they still managed to win by almost 17 points, I think. This team is going to be dangerous. This team is going to be really dangerous. Malcolm Brogdon he's exactly what I have hopes of Markelle Fultz kind of leveling out into.
Mm-hmm.
He's just an extremely efficient, well-rounded guy that's going to make everybody on your team better night in and night out. He's not going to blow any minds with his stats, but he's just Mr. Consistent on the court.
Yeah, man.
And
like
then
he's good.
If your top 2 is Oladipo and Sabonis, like that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I think people are sleeping on this team still.
I mean, I think a lot of people will always sleep on them just because they're in Indiana. No one really pays attention to Indiana besides maybe, Hoosiers basketball, because that's kind of what their gimmick is in Indiana. Maybe the Colts if they're playing well. The Pacers are a quiet team. They're going to do their things in silence. They move in silence like the G in lasagna. Corny joke, I know, but it's just like one of those things where I see this team. Like I do like this team a lot, and I think Sabonis is showing you that he's going for that All NBA team. He's looking to make a push, man, to get that All Star again, and I think that he's gonna do it, man. Like he is really good, and I think he's found his niche. He's found like a place where he can grow and develop, And I wish that we were looking at trading for him, and getting, the right assets for him, because I think he would actually be a great Celtic player for us, as someone who can command the middle, also stretch the floor. Maybe not the best free throw shooter, but definitely a guy that you could live with that as long as he does everything else. And man, like he's proving it to everybody. Like they are maybe a trade away from like being a contender in the Eastern Conference, because this team is so well balanced. The problem though is, of course, is going to be, do you trade somebody and then the team chemistry, the team balance just tilts the other way. Uh,
Yeah.
and so I
Well,
think, I don't know, like the Pacers to me are a team that I could definitely see. Uh, Obviously are going to probably make the playoffs with the way that they're playing, but
yeah.
will they be a finals contender? Probably not.
But I think the interesting thing for them too is like, has any team in the last 3 years been more of a like talked about trade team than the Pacers have? I don't think so. I mean, it's always who's going to trade for Sabonis, who's going to trade for Miles Turner, who's going to trade for Oladipo. It's always some better team is coming to pick away one of their players, right?
Right.
And I don't think you can say that about them anymore. I think they have too many like solid pieces that work well together to consider them a seller in the league anymore. And I like what they're doing. I actually liked Nate McMillan as their coach. I don't know. I would have kept him as the coach, but the guy they have now, Bjorkgren, I think is his name, Nate Bjorkgren.
Be on
He's
board.
I mean Jan Borg, yeah. He's getting the most out of his guys, man. I like this team a lot. I love Oladipo. I've loved him for years and years. I think he's awesome. Sabonis, awesome. I like the Pacers, man. They're a fun team. They're very fun.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be, we're going to see like what these teams are made of. Obviously, we're just 1 week into the NBA. We got someone in the chat. It's crazy how Orlando Magic is 4-0. Yeah, man, we talked about it earlier. Like the fact that they are, 4-0, Vucevic playing well, Markel Fultz looking to be like most improved player of the year so far. Like we're seeing a lot of, we're seeing like a completely different game of basketball right now. Obviously, the shortened rest season for these playoff teams that just played is going to be a huge factor into it. But man, it is this next couple games that we have here tonight. We got Memphis, Boston, we got Atlanta, Brooklyn, which I'm not sure how that's not the game of the night.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't understand that either.
you have Milwaukee, Miami again. Obviously blowout from last night, but I don't think it's going to be this time. You have the Hornets and the Dallas Mavericks. You have the Lakers and the Spurs. And then, of course, for NBA TV for game night tonight, you got the Portland Trailblazers and the LA Clippers. Not sure if I'm a huge fan of that last game, because I think that the Clippers right now, without Kawhi Leonard, because I know that he's still recovering from taking that shot to the mouth, um, I don't know how competitive that game's going to be. But I do think that what I'm seeing from this game is that, like, we're seeing for the weeks, for the NBA ratings are starting to go up a little bit. And Pete, I wanted to talk about this a little bit too.
Go for it.
So that I've always been kind of critical on a player like Ben Simmons, who, I haven't really seen him work on his craft as much, but more so working on his off brand, or like his brand, and trying to grow
Yeah.
that, like with FaZe Clan, and working on like these off deals. Like same thing with Joel Embiid, same things with like NFL players too. And what I'm seeing is that like the basketball output is not necessarily where I think it should be for some of these players, right? Um, and so I guess what I'm trying to ask here is like, do you think that we're now in an era where these players are seeing opportunities to make money at the
You got some
sacrifice and the
audio playing.
risk?
Oh, never mind. Sorry, that was me. My bad.
Oh,
Continue.
I was gonna say, do you see this as like, NBA players sacrificing their game for the monetary value of getting their brand up?
I think that's a bigger problem with sports in general right now. Like you mentioned the NBA, the NFL too. Like a guy like Baker Mayfield, like in every other advertisement on
Hulu has
TVZ.
live sports.
Dude, I don't know, man. I think it's a weird question. Not a weird question, but I think it's a complicated question because it's hard to blame these guys for doing that. It's really hard to blame them for doing that. When you're getting offered that much money just to film like a 30-second advertisement, like I'd be lying if I told you if I was in the position of somebody like Ben Simmons that I would be saying no to that. Like I would be doing that in a heartbeat, right? You're getting millions to film some nonsense advertisement. It takes maybe like 1/4 of your day away, and then you make a million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's a good question, but I think it has a lot more to do with like what the organizations that they're on value, right? Is that, and I think the Sixers are a good example. Like Ben Simmons, I think they love that about Ben Simmons. You know, he gets out, he gets his face everywhere. He's super popular. Everybody knows who he is. But then it doesn't really ever amount to this guy is one of the best players in the league. Like, this is not a, they win a lot of games every year, but they're not a serious, like, people think they're
Contender.
going to win the championship. Yeah. I wonder if it's more in line of like this is the culture they're building in some of these places. Like we just want you guys to be super famous and put butts in seats when you can have people in seats, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know, man. I think that's a hard question to answer because I think we have yet to see a young player in the league who is actively participating in that amount to much, much like winning. And until a player breaks that mold, I don't know if that question is going to be easy to answer one way or the other.
Yeah.
Um, in any sport, like Patrick Mahomes, right, in the NFL, was not in advertisements until he was already one of the best players in the league, in a serious, like, this guy can win a championship. And then they did win a championship.
Mm-hmm.
Baker Mayfield was getting those advertisements way before he was winning games. The same thing with Ben Simmons. He was getting that before they were serious, like any good. So I don't know, man. I think a player is going to come around that is getting those accolades and advertisements and deals like that, and then they're going to win, and then people are going to think very differently about it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like what I'm noticing now, and this is just kind of maybe this is just old head speaking. This is probably the coach in me speaking right now. It's just like I don't really necessarily see the guys work on their game. Like for most of what I'm like, the only guy that I see really work on it is a guy like LeBron James, and he's like in his the what 18th season right now.
Yep.
30 he turned 36 just I believe today. And so it's to me it's one of those things where it's like I wish that there was guys that would follow the LeBron James route where they do the advertisements, they do all this stuff, but then they also work on their craft. Like for me, like the reason why I criticize Ben Simmons so much is because I feel like he does the latter, where he does a lot of the things, but I just don't feel like he changes his game to a point where it's like it helps the 76ers win. It's the same thing with a guy like Joel Embiid. Doesn't change his eating habits, doesn't probably change a couple things. And now we're seeing, Joel Embiid injured again. Like he obviously these are like little injuries, they're not like big ones. But what's concerning to me is that these guys have so much talent, so much potential. Like I talked about this with Ben Simmons. Like he could have been the next Magic Johnson with the 3-point shot,
Mm-hmm.
and he just hasn't really lived up to working on that. A guy maybe like Juju Smith-Schuster, a same thing, trying to work on his brand, doing the TikToks on top of on the logo of the opposing team or whatever team he
Yeah.
goes to. And I just feel like it's too much of a brand thing. I feel like it's maybe I don't know if selfishness is the right word, but
Nah,
it's
I don't think it's selfish. I think they have every right to do that. Like if you have the pull already as a young guy to get that money, like you have to say like that's perfectly fair to do that. It's just whether like you're putting the work in to actually deserve that attention. That's the real question. And I think that maybe the more um insidious part of that is the companies that are paying all this money, like to these guys that have this name. Is there any like any sort of, I mean, it's an easy question to answer, really. They're not looking for talent evaluation, They're looking for, oh my gosh, Ben Simmons has a huge name on social media. Oh, Baker Mayfield has a huge name on social media. He gives interviews that are crazy, right?
mm-hmm.
They don't really care if it amounts to a championship. As long as that guy gets talked about online, the agenda is already in their means, but then that doesn't really match up with what the players in their careers should be looking for long term. You know,
Yeah.
are they reaching for the bag too early? Is I think the more apt question. Like, earn it in the long term in your career and invest in yourself on the court, which is the biggest difference with LeBron to a lot of these guys. And maybe that's a difference in when he was young in the league and now, but he wasn't out there doing ads every 5 minutes 15 years ago. Even 10 years ago, he wasn't really doing that because he was investing in himself on the court to sustain it for a long time. And
Right.
now that he has that foundation in place, he can do a Sprite ad because it doesn't really matter anymore. You know, now that's just extra money to him. You know,
Exactly.
it
You know.
doesn't take away from his development as an 18-year vet in the league at all. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's an
You know.
interesting question.
Yeah, and he's making money with Sprite with cranberry for the holiday season. I really wish that who's the Drum? I wish that Drum would actually release like a full version of that song. I
It's
would
a good song, dude. Dram
it,
always puts out good music. I like him.
I would like that. But like what I'm seeing from here, man, is that like looks like Kawhi Leonard's gonna be out for the day. Kawhi Leonard's kind of falling into that trap a little bit too with his ads. He was with Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator when he first moved to LA. You're seeing him in like many of these adverts where it's like, you barely even heard of him. In terms of like being out there in the social media atmosphere or even just like
Oh, that
doing
yeah, the
adverts.
average fan. Yeah, the average fan. No way.
Uh, and it's just one of those things where, like, right now, I think we're kind of in this interesting era of really trying to promote yourself, promote your brand, and really get yourself ahead of the game. I mean, I'm doing it right now with this podcast,
Mhm.
trying to create a brand here. But, I think the difference is that, like, with the NBA, it's a very, production driven league. It's like, what have you done for me lately? And, I just don't know right now if some of the players' production is matching what they're doing in adverts. And Baker
Oh,
Mayfield,
certainly.
Baker Mayfield is like the prime example. And I know that this is different from basketball, but Baker Mayfield was struggling his first 2 years in the NFL. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, it's like, you see him in every single ad, and it's like, dude, are you working on your game, or are you just filming Hulu has live sports every 6 minutes?
Yep.
And it's just and it's one of those things where I don't want people to not get their bag, but you also have to put in the work as well. And like I said, this is the reason why I criticize guys like Ben Simmons, because I know how good he can be. I know what type of talent he can be, but he has yet to really put in the work to warrant where he's at. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't put in any work, but I think he can be a lot better. I think that he can be
Oh, yeah.
all NBA first team if he has a 3-point shot. Like, right now what I'm seeing from him is kind of like you're getting the same Ben Simmons from year 1 to where he's right now at like year 5 or year 6. And I
Mhm.
think that he has the potential to be even better. I think that if he really worked on that 3-point shot, like I think a lot of us wanted him to, I think he could actually, like I said, be an all NBA player, could be an all star, and maybe like the team leader to pick for like maybe it's Team Simmons versus Team Doncic. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like I don't necessarily see that from, or like Team LeBron versus Team uh, Ben Simmons, and I think that's what I want to see from Ben Simmons. And
Well,
so,
and to give a player on the opposite side of things, and somebody who I think is like a good example of this is Brandon Ingram, right? A highly touted player, obviously coming into the league, and then like he didn't necessarily pan out immediately, like we were talking about earlier, and he was
hmm
super scrutinized while he was with the Lakers. Brandon Ingram is one of the he I mean, in terms of notoriety and how good he is to how quiet he is maybe number one. Like he gave one of his first long form interviews I've ever seen in the last week on the JJ Redick podcast. Really good, uh, very interesting listen. If you guys haven't heard that yet, go check it out. But his mentality that he describes in that podcast is like, I want to be a basketball player. Like, I want to be the best I possibly can. So, what's
hmm
the point of me talking and being out there in the media if I'm not performing to the level that I know I can in the long run?
right,
And that's the difference between Ben Simmons and Brandon Ingram. And the reason why I think, and I love Ben Simmons. We've talked about this ad nauseum, the difference of how I look at Ben Simmons versus how you look at Ben Simmons. But I would be hard pressed to say that in his current capacity and the way that it seems like he views basketball, he's very close, if not at his pinnacle as a basketball player. Like long term, he's not going to continue to get better because that's not what his game is about,
Mm-hmm.
right? Brandon Ingram has been better every single season by a wide margin. He's been getting better every year. And a guy like him, there's no reason why that won't continue to the point where in a year, a couple of years from now, maybe even 3 years, he could be a first team all NBA player, right? And I think that you wouldn't, nobody who's an avid basketball fan should think that that's crazy because he is that good and he puts
Mm-hmm.
the time into his game in order to be that good. So
Exactly.
the question is like, I think it's as simple as saying sustainability versus instant payout. You know, I'm looking to get the bag right now versus I'm going to continue to build my bag up and get a bigger one 10 years from now when I'm the best player in the league.
Right.
It depends on what you value. Some guys value that I want that payout right now a little bit more than others.
Yeah, I mean you're definitely right on that, and a guy like Brandon Ingram different from a guy like Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and all these other kind of young players that are kind of going into the league right now. I mean, I wish that like I said, because I think Ben Simmons had the potential to be a LeBron James esque type of player where he was like a point forward where he can create for his teammates, but also when the time gets going, like he can score. And Joel Embiid can kind of be the big fella that that benefits from Ben Simmons attacking the rim
Yeah.
constantly. And instead, what I'm seeing from Ben Simmons sometimes is that, and this might be coaching, and I don't understand and I really want to kind of deep dive into it. So I think what I will do is I'll do a little bit more research on Ben Simmons and in terms of like how he's been playing this season and comparing it to Brett Brown offense. Obviously Doc Rivers
Yeah.
offense is like here and Brett Brown's is like all the way down. But I want to compare the two because I feel like from what I'm seeing on and this is just not me even doing any research and just kind of watching the games. It seems like he's in the same position than he was with Brent Brown. And I feel like his game won't improve because he's playing in that same low post, maybe not low post, like the low block where it's kind of a short corner type of route where it's like everybody kind of pushes up high because they're like, oh, shoot the 3-point shot. And then they kind of get it down low to Ben Simmons and he's able to finish around the rim.
Yep.
And I want to see more from Ben Simmons than just being basically a power forward that or like one of those like old school centers that stays in the low block, no one pays attention to, is able to get some easy points.
Yeah, and let me pose another question because I think this is a pretty interesting topic, not just in terms of like your or not yours, but these players like their fiscal situation, like how much money they're making in media notoriety. But I think the other question to ask with somebody like Ben Simmons, and this is going to go for a lot of players in the league with the changing mentality of team building.
Mm-hmm.
How does having a tanking culture mixed with a bad coach on purpose, like if you watch basketball, which you and I do, right? Every
Mm-hmm.
single day that it's on, you and I watch basketball. A lot of people in the chat watch basketball all the time, obviously, right? That's why we're all here. But the average viewer might not realize how bad of a coach Brett Brown was, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't, it's very fair to say that he was only in the position that he was in because they knew having a coach like him would lose more games than having a coach like Steve Clifford or Tom Thibodeau, somebody that refuses to lose every night, right? Whether or not they're going to win you the championship is not really my point, but they're guys that are never going to throw a game or put out a lackluster lineup so that they might not win on purpose,
Right.
right? How does that affect the long-term development of a guy like Ben Simmons, and how can you actually go back and fix it? Is it even fixable? Like you've wasted the prime developmental years of Ben Simmons' career purposefully losing games so that you could build around him. How does that turn him into a well-rounded mental player in the long term? And I think that using the 76ers as an example, this will be a really interesting litmus test season for tanking culture in the NBA. Because now, by all accounts, you have, I would say a great coach in Doc Rivers, but I know a lot of people would disagree. But at the very least, he's a good coach, right? The very least, you could say. I think it's fair to say he's an elite coach, and I think it's fair for some people to say he's an above average coach. There's no excuse anymore for Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, right? You have a fairly well constructed team of players that kind of mesh well with what they do effectively, and now a good coach and a great general manager in Daryl Morey. If it still doesn't amount to anything more than a second round appearance to the playoffs where they get walloped by a better coach team, does that not show that like you've stunted the growth of two generational players in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons?
I mean, I never really thought of it that way, but I think like when I really think about it and when I was kind of reflecting as you were talking, it's like that is 100% what it is. Because when you really stop to think about it, right? You have this culture of we're trying to tank so we can get the top two best players in the
Mm-hmm.
league, and Joel Embiid gets hurt, out for a year. Ben Simmons gets hurt, out for a year. And you really stunt the growth and development of these players to a point where it's like they're used to just being like, you know what? We lose, we lose. I don't really care. Whereas, you got the Miami Heat who had a different culture, right? They were always kind of like in that lottery battle. Everyone was telling them, oh, you should tank. You should, try and build that way. But they have shown you that through their building, they were able to get to the NBA finals. And I know that this was an island of misfit toys type of team, but this team came together. They, Jimmy Butler, that's another thing we'll talk about with the 76ers, is that like the Miami Heat were able to build a very successful team. They were able to kind of do their thing, and they were able to be a team where it's like, in the heck did this team make the NBA finals? Um, and right now, I think that's the reason, like primarily, and I don't remember if Jimmy Butler got traded or if he signed to a different team. Um, but I think it's the reason why Jimmy Butler left at the end. And the reason why Jimmy Butler didn't fit the 76ers culture is because the culture of the 76ers is let's keep losing, let's keep tanking, let's keep doing these things so we can get better players in the draft and we'll build that way. But we
Well, and it's my biggest, sorry to cut in, but it's my biggest defense of Ben Simmons, right? And it's hard to defend him because it's his decision to get better at what he's bad at. At the end of the day, that's ultimately his choice. Like if he wants to go in the gym and put up 1,000 3-pointers every week, which he should be doing, that's his choice. But ultimately, if in the years where he's supposed to be getting better, you don't expect that of him and you don't enforce any sort of cultural structure around him,
mm-hmm.
how is it it's not his fault if he was never coached in a way that was going to benefit him in his growth as a player. And the Heat is a perfect example, right? They've kept one of the 5 best coaches in the league. Even when people thought they were going to be bad, they still had one of the best coaches in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And Spoelstra is never going out coaching in a way that's going to be detrimental to his team to get a better pick, ever. He's not going to do it.
Exactly.
Pat Riley will never go for that as the front office of a team either. So when you look at the long-term viability of a contending team built in the draft, you have to also be building up their mental determination to get better and to actually win at the same time. And the 76ers never did that. They didn't do it.
Yeah,
They
I
didn't
mean,
do it.
I think that you can say that it may not be Ben Simmons' fault or Joel Embiid's fault, but they are ultimately at the ones that need to put in the work and effort. Like, it's
Yeah.
one of those things. It's the intrinsic value of what you find in yourself, and I think that this is probably like more of a philosophy type of question, right? It's the same thing that we tell our players as a high school coach. It's like, we can be in the gym and we can force you to shoot as many jumpers as you want, work on your game, but during the summer when we're not there coaching you, it's really on you if you want to be a better basketball
Yep.
player. Like, we could lock you in the gym and say you're not leaving this gym until you put up 1,000 jumpers, you memorize the plays, you do all these type of things. But at the end of the day, it's really what's inside you. And right now, um, it's the reason why I think Jimmy Butler left is because he saw that inside Ben Simmons inside Joel Embiid, they are not willing to put in that extra work and effort in order to get into a position where a lot of people had this team, just like a couple seasons ago or when they first formed, to be an NBA Finals team, to be a team that could take down the mighty Warriors, when they were still alive and kicking.
Mm-hmm.
Or try and face this LeBron James type of team and be like, this team could potentially beat the LA Lakers because they have so many good weapons around them. But it's the same story, same song and dance that I saw with the Clippers. It's the same one I'm seeing right now with the 76ers. And I'm talking about the LA Clippers with like Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and Chris Paul. Even though I think
Yeah.
Chris Paul is built different, I think when it comes to guys like Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, we'll see, DeAndre Jordan with the Nets this season. But it's the intrinsic value to get better and to really perform at an expectation, a level where I think, you know, you could be that team that gets to the NBA Finals. You could live up to the expectations. And like I said time and time again, and I don't want to beat a dead horse or circle like around and kind of go to the same talking point, but if you're not putting in the work and effort in the off season to get better, to learn different plays, to learn different moves, work with different trainers, maybe not just work with different shot coaches so you can get your shot better, or working with different post players so you can work on some different post moves, work on your offense, work on, okay, let me see how I can get to my spots where I like to shoot it. Like looking at my hot zones and seeing like, okay, Ben Simmons, you like to shoot from the left hand block, and this is like your hot spot. Like, let's work on some moves to get you into that hot spot so those shots are easier to make. And
Yeah.
like, this is where, in my opinion, the 76ers ultimately doomed those two players. And I think in 10 years, if they don't even sniff the NBA final, well, even if they do sniff the NBA finals, but if they don't even win a single championship, this will be a ESPN 30 for 30 waiting to happen.
Yeah, and it'll be the ultimate counter to tanking in the NBA. What's the cost of tanking? If we tank for Cade Cunningham and then we have an absolute awful nightmare team the next season after we get him, right? What's the point? You're setting him up for failure anyway. You could be, and it completely is going to hinge on the mentality of a 19-year-old kid, which in terms of sustaining something great, I mean, there's been a lot of great 19-year-olds, but you can't hinge your whole bet on the mentality of a 19-year-old, right? Nobody can do that. You're still a kid at that point.
Exactly.
So, and this point, we could keep talking about this for hours, but the only other thing I'll say is like in the NBA nowadays, the natural greatness of a lot of players, I think, and people are starting to understand this. It's the ceiling is, or the basement, I should say, in terms of the great players, is so much higher, right? Like even great players on bad teams are better than they used to be,
Yeah.
right? But the mentality is different. To me, the mentality is the big difference. And the reason why you have guys like Ben Simmons. And another perfect example in another Jimmy Butler team is Minnesota,
Yep.
right? The reason why he was so upset being in Minnesota is because the guys he's playing with didn't want to win it to the level that he did. They probably want to win, but are you willing to go from being a good player to a great player? The mental part is as much in play as the actual on-court stuff, right? Because nobody can sit around and say natural talent Ben Simmons isn't top 10 in the league right now, right? Natural talent.
Yeah.
Easily top 10, maybe even top 3 if you're really looking into it. He might be just naturally that gifted of a guy. But doesn't matter if mentally you're not willing to break yourself down to the point where you're willing to face the fact that, God, I suck at 3-point shooting. Maybe I need to do that. And that's where I find the biggest questions with some of these teams and players that people just say, oh my gosh, he's so great. I expect such big things of him. Right. And it's the reason I'm so hesitant with somebody like Trae Young. Right. The guy is very clearly not working on his defense. Fair to say, there's been no improvement over 3 seasons defensively. If you're not willing to look in the mirror and say, man, I was dead last in the NBA in defense last year, I need to get better on this. If you can't do that, you probably are not going to win a championship as the best player on your team. You probably aren't. So guys like Cat, guys
Yep.
like Andrew Wiggins, I mean, is a
Yep.
much poorer example of that because he's not as talented as those other guys, but still somebody who had really high expectations. He clearly never looked in the mirror and said, man, I am this inefficient of a shooter. I need to stop taking these shots. He never did that.
Yeah.
And that's historically always been the case with a lot of guys. Vince Carter never got better at 3-point shooting until he had been in the league for 15 seasons. There's a reason he never won a championship as the best player on a team. He never faced the facts and got better. John Wall never got better, more consistent as a shooter. He never did. So I don't know, man. I'm interested to see. It's a good question to ask with the media stuff and how much money they make from their advertisements. But to me, the more important part of that is what does that say mentally about what they're doing in their preparation to be great? Are
Yeah.
you willing to sacrifice? And I just don't see it from a lot of guys nowadays. I just don't. I mean, Giannis is a good example of somebody I think that does put that work in, you know? Like that guy is always doing something, always trying to get better. He talks about things he can do better. But not a lot of guys have that same energy, you know? Not a
Yeah.
lot of guys are willing to talk down about themselves because it's true. They just don't want to see it.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of like the era that we're living in, just as like human beings in general, right? Like what I find interesting, and you kind of brought it up, is that there's some players that really like the idea and the value of the perks that come with being in the league, right? The opportunities of making money, the opportunities of building your brand, the opportunities of getting into different investments that can make you money in the long haul. Which, you know what, I have no problem with that, because that, everybody has to do that at some point. Whether you're some Joe Schmo that's a plumber and you get a big contract to work alongside a different company, or to like get the big contract, I am okay with that. But like if you're just going to be like an average plumber, if you're going to be an average type of player, like, or average player, like we saw with like, and the thing that frustrates me the most is a guy like Karl Anthony Towns, and you pointed it out. That guy has so much talent to where I refuse to believe, and you know what? I've been an idiot because of it. I refuse to believe that he doesn't want to win. And from what I've seen and the effort in some of the games that I've seen and some of the situations, Andrew Wiggins is the prime example of it. Ben Simmons is starting to become an example of it. It's like they're not willing to put in that work to get better. They're not frustrated with winning. Like, that's the reason why I will always choose a guy like Westbrook over some of these guys, is because Westbrook at least wants to win. Like, even though it's not the best way to win,
Mm-hmm.
he still has that effort, he still has that energy, and he got a Jordan Brand deal because of it. And I don't think
Yeah.
that these guys can necessarily look and say like, well, if I focus more on getting my bag, I'll do like some more long-term investing and more. And this is where I think, and I'm glad that the NBA has this in place, where it's like you have education of how to spend your money, how money works, like how much of your money comes out of your contract, what you pay to your agents, how much should you really be spending on a mortgage, like what's the realistic expectations of your contract, and what you can and can't do with it. And not to get into other people's business, but the Dwayne Haskins situation, the James Harden situation, you get
Mm-hmm.
stuck in that like establishment type of environment where it's like you're wasting so much money away from that, man. And I know that this is going to sound like probably the oldest old head that people are going to probably tune this out, but I do think that these guys could make a lot more money by being just better basketball players, like working on your craft, getting into the gym early in the morning. That's the reason why guys like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Michael Jordan were so successful. They were
Yeah.
so enamored with winning. They were so enamored with trying to get better. They're always enamored with, oh shoot, if I don't get better, I'm going to be falling behind, and there's going to be more players that ahead of me that want that spot that I have. And
Yeah.
I don't see that from a lot of guys, like you said. And I just think it's the mentality of maybe this generation, kind of like at the tail end of our generation, which is like the millennial era, and kind of into this Gen Z,
Yep.
is that like there's no desire to want to be the best. It's the desire of, I'm satisfied with what I have, and I want to just keep like, or maybe it's not that, but it's just more so like you enjoy the perks and not really the grind and the effort to get to the ultimate goal. And
Yeah.
this, and some people, they have different aspirations, they have different aspects, and it is frustrating to watch because I know, like I said, Ben Simmons, when he came out of the draft, I was so ecstatic for the 76ers because they got a player that has the potential to be a LeBron James, Magic Johnson-esque type of player. And I just don't believe at this moment he's lived up to that expectation. Same thing with Karl Anthony Towns. The
100.
expectations
Yeah.
of being a Shaq like player and has not lived up to that.
Yeah. And to be my own version of an old head, right? This is, not a very popular opinion right now, but I think it's going to get more and more as we continue on in the next few years with how influential these guys are. This to me is the biggest negative aspect of player empowerment, right? And I think it's the reason why you have guys like Chuck, like Charles Barkley, and Shaq, and they're always talking on TNT and they're always frustrated with these guys. In a lot of ways, these huge money contracts and the superstardom, it comes way too easy right now for a lot of these guys. They get it without putting the time in to actually earn it. One, and two, I mean, man, it's just like, it goes to what we keep saying, sustainability. Like, do I want to get this now, this notoriety right now, or do I want to have a legend at the end of it? You know? And a lot of guys right now just don't care. They just don't care.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, I think that right there is the worst part of player empowerment, like I said, is how much responsibility it takes off of the player's shoulders to actually live up to their contracts and be the focal point of a team in a city where the city loves them. And then you can pull a James Harden like he's doing right now, betray your city, your fan base that's rooted for you for years, get fat in comparison to what you have been in the past, and make a fool of yourself and your team. But you're still going to get a mega contract. You're still going to get traded where you want to get traded, probably. You're still going to be an all-star, all NBA. All of these things are still going to happen for these guys because
Yeah.
they're that famous, because they do put up stats. You get those things no matter what. Whether or not you actually live up to it is almost besides the point right now. And I think like the era we live in more than anything is like crowning people too early for their achievements that they haven't actually achieved, you
Yeah.
know? And that's my big thing. Like, I hate to keep harping on Trae, but right now it's the most talked about one of like this guy is getting crowned the MVP after 3 games. They were one of the worst teams in the league last season. He hasn't done anything. And people are telling this kid that he's the MVP and their team is a contender. They haven't done anything. Do something first. If you're an Atlanta Hawks fan and you're sitting there telling Trae Young you're at your house chanting MVP for this guy, why are you already happy with what he's done? He hasn't earned it yet. Right? Is that not like, I think that's pretty old head of me to say, but it's part of the reason you fall into the situation that the 76ers are in right now, that your Boston Celtics are in right now. People are crowning Ben Simmons and Jason Tatum the next big thing, the MVP, the next championship winning player before he's even gotten close to it. And then you let these kids convince themselves that that's what they are, but they haven't done it. So then they stop putting the work in to actually get to it, and then it never happens. That's why you have LeBron James is 38 years old. I know he's not that old, but he's getting up there and he's still better than all these guys because he still puts the work in. And because for some reason he still has to earn it with the way that people talk about him and think about it. He has to earn it every day in his mind and in media, in the media's eye. He has to earn it every single day. Ben
Exactly.
Simmons doesn't have to do that. Karl Anthony Towns, and I hate to harp on him with the situation he's been in with Corona and his family. It's awful. But as an athlete and as an employee, there is no way regardless if you're a Timberwolves fan, whoever you're a fan of, if you're his biggest fan on planet Earth, that guy has not lived up to the potential that you drafted him having. He has not done it. Even though he puts up stats, he's been an all-star, he's never done it. He's never even gotten close. He's a terrible defender, and he's never gotten better. Why
Yeah.
are you crowning this guy an all-star MVP candidate? This guy is one of the best players in the league if he hasn't done crap about it. I don't understand why nobody ever learns from this stuff. You're setting your guys up for failure.
Yeah. And I mean, this could be like a conversation that goes even way back to their high school days or AAU and kind of like been given everything right. Like, not by, obviously some of them come from poverty. Some of them come from, decent homes. But mostly from these guys, it's more so like the shoe companies and these teams, the offenses run to their liking. The shoes that they get are what they like. The college teams, cater to them, giving them everything. And I think that this is kind of the generation that we live in, where it's like you have to give these things to these guys early, or else they'll be disinterested, which I don't necessarily agree with. I
No.
think and this is kind of like we said, this is the old head in us, right? Where it's like everything's earned, not given. And I think LeBron James kind of realized that when he came to LA. We heard, the year that he was with Lonzo and Ingram and all this stuff, like LeBron James has not earned to be the greatest. Like, some people, like the media was talking about him being one of the greatest Lakers ever, even before he won a championship. And
Yeah.
and I think that LeBron is like, I haven't really done anything yet. And then when he won the championship with getting AD to the team, with changing AD's mindset and attitude, like now we're seeing obviously AD's not playing very well at the moment, but we're seeing a different mindset with these guys, and that's kind of what I want to get at to these players coming up in the league, for guys like Chet Holmgren, Cade Cunningham, and many of these young players coming up and going to the NBA. You have to stay hungry, man. Like, you have to be enamored with winning if you want. If championships, like, and this is the thing we have to also realize too, Pete, is that not everybody in the NBA is in it just for the championships and to be the best basketball player in the world.
Oh,
So
certainly not.
some
Yeah.
people just love the perks of it. They're like, once I get to the NBA, I'm gonna get that house, I'm gonna get that car, I'm gonna get investing. For some people, it might be the women, the men, whatever your preference is, and just kind of living in that aspect.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like I want the mindset to change for these players, because for some of these guys, they have that, and for a lot of them, they don't. And I want people to have that. Nope, nope, get out of here, Siri. And for some people, it's like, why can't that be the case? And it's the intrinsic value of like working on bettering your game, working on bettering yourself. And for some players, man, it's not in their, maybe not their vocabulary, but more so it's not in their DNA. Some people have
Yeah.
it, some people don't, and it's going to be the age old question of life, right? What motivates you?
Yep. And the NBA right now is like, I think it's more interesting than it's ever been in terms of what these guys are actually like searching for, what they're reaching for. And it's, I keep saying this, but it's the biggest side effect of the player empowerment. And a guy, as I'm shocked, and neither of us have brought him up, but Kyrie is a really interesting example, right? Because he did end up winning.
Yeah,
He benefited incredibly, like a ton, from being around the biggest winner of like our basketball lifetimes, right? LeBron. And then he gave no credit to the person who probably helped teach him to be that type of like mental athlete as well, you know?
yeah, exactly.
And now you see where he's at. He's been on, a few teams in 4 years. He's been on the Cavs towards the end. He got traded to the Celtics. It worked out awfully there. And now he's on the Nets. And, so far, nothing of note has happened, but people already are crowning them as, the most dangerous team to the Lakers, right? They're 2-2. They haven't done anything yet. And I know that you have guys with incredible amounts of, legacy already in the league, but what is it ever going to amount to if you're not doing it consistently? You know, what are
Yeah.
you going to do? What is it? I don't know. And another interesting case study is the Clippers, Kawhi in particular, right? Went and won a championship, and who knows, like, that was an incredible way to win a championship. But who knows what would have happened if LeBron hadn't got hurt that season? Who knows?
Or even
Um,
the jump shot that went in for him, right? That one against Philadelphia
exactly.
to send him into the NBA finals. It's like, it's a different story. And that's kind of like where I agree with you there is like, it's the age old question of, what motivates a player. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, like, is he just sad? He's working with his MVP trainer. He's back to his old ways. But I think that with some guys, they're excuse makers, and some guys make excuses. Some guys are owning up to their failures, where I feel like Paul George doesn't as much. And so, I sorry to cut you off where you were at, but
No,
it's like, I don't know. It's a frustrating thing because as a coach, you want the best for your players. You want your players to perform. You want your players to get better and to really, live up to what they feel like is their expectations of what their game's at.
exactly. Exactly. And you know, we're in an interesting like a long-term conversation here, but like let me pose a question to you. Because we've harped on a couple guys in particular, Ben Simmons, Cat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are there players on the flip side that you feel like, even though they haven't done anything yet, you see the potential of like this guy? And I mentioned Brandon Ingram. Like, I see sky's the limit for him, right? And I think especially if he stays along Zion, who I think it's a little too soon to be determined, but it seems like he is constantly working to get better too. Um, I think there's some people that are interesting. Like I would throw Devin Booker in the conversation. Seems like a
Mm-hmm.
guy that's
So
willing to do whatever it takes to get better.
yeah, the Jenner thing kind of concerns me, but that's a different story.
Yeah, but that's almost like a personal preference thing, right? Like I think if you look at a guy like Cat or Ben Simmons, there's no personal preference in what they're doing. It's obvious that they're not putting their full focus into being better,
Right.
right? But by all accounts, Devin Booker took one of the most demanding teammates and like wanted him to come play with him, right?
Right.
Chris Paul. Like he sought that out. I want to play with a guy that has been maligned as a difficult guy to work with because he expects so much of the people around him.
Right.
I have a lot of stake in somebody that's willing to put themselves in that position to get better. Somebody like Kyle Kuzma is another wonderful example. Whatever you think about his game, Kyle Kuzma is he's obviously trying to get better all the time because he's
Mm-hmm.
stayed in a tough situation in order to win and get better. Do you have anybody else you could think of that you see like potential of like this guy is going to build into not only a legend, like a good career, but a legendary career?
I think Anthony Edwards is no a rookie this year, but I think he's someone that kind of reminds me of like a young Dwayne Wade. I that was kind of like the question was always going to be his ceiling for him. But I think he's one of those guys. I think as much as his dad makes a lot of noise, I think Lonzo is kind of the same way. Like Alonzo has definitely improved. Obviously, he's kind of having a bad couple stretches here, but he's a guy like that. And I think Trae Young, to an extent, is like that. Obviously, defensively, I don't think it's ever going to happen because I think with defense, he's just too small to
Mm,
stay in front. Not like stay in front, but more so like be able to like contest or like not get like basically bodied out. But I think he's a guy that works in silence. Like I watch his IG stories, I watch his Snapchat stuff. Like obviously, that doesn't tell the whole story because some people don't like to post. But he's a guy like that. I think a guy like Tyrese Halliburton is going to be like that. And in terms of just like young players, I think Jaylen Brown is like that, and that's kind of why you're seeing like a better performing Jaylen Brown in this last year compared to his years past, is because he's actually
yeah,
working on his game, and not really wants to win. Because I think that the Celtics really want this to work out, but they're going to have to start, manning the ship a little bit better. So, I think that's kind of like where I'm at with like players that like, and there's probably a long list of guys, but
I'd
those are
throw
the guys
De'Aaron
that I
Fox
can.
in there too.
De'Aaron Fox in there as well. De'Aaron Fox wants to win, um, and I think there's a lot of guys like that too. But I'm going to go to the bathroom really quick. So if you want to host the show for just a little bit.
Oh boy. All right. What am I going to talk about? Let's talk about the Memphis Grizzlies while Bernie's gone. I think they're an interesting team. I have thoughts about them. I mean, anybody in the chat, if people are still hanging out, like, how much do you think Ja being out for 5 weeks is going to impact the Grizzlies team this season? Like, what they're going to be able to accomplish? Because man, I know it's a small sample size. I know we got hurt halfway through, the Nets game. But man, I had them as my 6th seed. They were my surprise playoff team, a little bit higher than most people would have considered them. I love the Grizzlies. I think the sky is the limit for that team. Jaren wasn't even playing, Jaren Jackson Jr. And then you got guys like Brandon Clark. I really like Brandon Clark. I really like Dylan Brooks too. I think he shoots a little too much, but man, that team, they might be one of those young teams that is going to be, they're going to be scary in a couple of years. Scary. And Ja, dude, just like, continuing on what we were just talking about, Bernie and myself, about like that hunger and drive to become a better version of yourself as a player and do the things that other people maybe are not willing to do on the court. Just always impressed with that kid. Always. And I don't know anybody who still watches that was around when I used to be on the channel a few years back, like all the time. But going into that draft a couple years ago with Zion and Ja and RJ, I was much lower on Ja than most people were. Like, as a Knicks fan, it was highly rumored, considered like the Knicks, are they going to be able to get Ja in the top 1, 2, 3 picks wherever we landed? And I was always, let's go Zion, obviously number 1, maybe RJ borderline number 2 or 1, and then Ja was like a 3 or 4. And now it's like, geez, man, I would actually probably rather take Ja over Zion right now. That's just me though, and that's
That's
purely just like,
blasphemous.
no, it's not. You really think that's that crazy?
So I just kind of said what I said. What would you say?
Okay. You're
I was
coming
just
in with
coming.
the
I was
heater
coming
rather
in.
than here.
Yeah.
I was just talking about like the Grizzlies, but in particular Ja. Like, I think I would be hard pressed to want, if like, here's my question. Let me rephrase so I can answer my own question and then ask you the same. If you were to build around a guy that's under 23 right now in the whole league, so this takes out somebody like Giannis, okay? Who would you take number 1? Right? I think Luka's obviously number 1, so let's exclude him from the conversation too. But besides Luka, who's your number 1? To me, I would be very hard pressed to pick anyone but Ja. Maybe Zion, but I would probably say Ja Morant. He'd be my number 1 besides those
John
guys.
Morant. Okay. This is tough.
It's
Um,
a tough question, man. There's a lot of incredible. I mean, there'd be a lot of people who would say Trae Young. There'd be a lot of people who would say Trae Young in this question. I think that's crazy, but there's a lot of people that would say that.
uh, man, this is actually a really tough question. Under
Because
20.
you could pick Tatum too. Tatum is another incredible one to pick.
Yeah, I think I honestly did think I would pick Tatum. I think with Tatum, you get a little bit of everything. Obviously, the assist and kind of the passing is not there, but I do like his ability to score the rock. And I think in this league, you have to put the ball in the hoop in order to win games. And so I think
Yep.
I have him as kind of my guy. But I wouldn't be opposed to a guy like Trae Young. I wouldn't be opposed to a guy like obviously Luka Doncic. John Morant is definitely on that list because of how athletic he is, and shoots the ball at a very decent clip. So, this is going to be one of those things, man. Like we'll see how this kind of develops. Zion, I think is kind of a little bit lower on my list because he's like, it's like, what is he? Is he a power forward? Is he a small forward? And so, like, that's kind of where I'm at with the guy like Zion.
Wow, really? Hold on. I know it seems like you're ready to move off this, but now I just need to know. Like, give me your top 3.
Top
Like, if I
three.
was to take if I was to start a franchise right now as the general manager and I had to pick somebody under 24, who am I picking?
All right, now we're changing the ages. Okay, let's see here. Under
Well, under
24.
23. I mean, under 23 is fine too. Whatever works.
Oh
I
man.
was really just trying to exclude Giannis from the conversation because Giannis and Luca are obviously the number 1 and 2.
I mean, I would probably, it'd be Luca. Probably if you're gonna make that list, it'd be Luca.
Cut him out too, just because I want to hear 3 people that are not Luca.
3 people that are not Luca. Okay.
Yeah, because he would be in both of ours.
Let me. Now I gotta look at a list of like players under 23. But I'd probably put Tatum in there. I would put Trae Young in there, and I put John Morant in there.
Wow.
I'd leave
Say that
Zion
one more
out.
time.
Ja, Tatum, and Trae.
Ja, and Trae. That's super interesting. I would say Ja. Obviously, I'm standing him right now. Talon Horton Tucker.
Taylor Horton Tucker.
Give me Talon Horton Tucker, baby. No, here I'm gonna give you a surprise pick though. Oh no, I can't pick him. That would be a reach. I think.
Let's see.
I'm gonna say Ja, Zion, and Tatum. I'll leave Trae out. I'll leave Trae out. The one I was gonna say, and I think I might just be higher on him than a lot of people are, but I love Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think he's so awesome. Such an incredible player to build a team around. I would pick him over Trae, which I know is blasphemous to a lot of people. So,
what about your boy Brandon Ingram? I forgot about him too. He's another guy. He's only 23, which is crazy. He's been in the league.
Yeah, that is crazy. He'd be up there too. Honestly, I'd pick him over Trae as well. I'm such
crazy.
a hater.
It's crazy.
I'm such a hater, bro.
You are a hater. I know that you're a Luka Doncic stan, but come on, man.
I'm a hater. I'd pick Trae over somebody like Donovan Mitchell, right? Who's also up there in contention.
Bam Adebayo?
I'd take Trae over Bam. Bam would be towards the bottom of this list of super high quality players I'd pick. I just don't really see where Bam goes. Like how he gets much higher.
Malik Beasley?
Mr. AK-47. I don't know if that's what he had. I just made that up. Let me not throw shade at Malik Beasley. Maybe the player I want to throw the least shade at of anybody.
Larsa Pippen, you can make a shade of that.
Yeah, man. I don't know, dude. Jamal Murray has got probably people talk about him. I think Jokic is already 24, 25.
DeJounte Murray could be on this list.
Dude, hey, somebody we haven't talked about even a little bit today at all, but in this conversation, somebody might call me crazy for throwing his name in this conversation, but what about Colin Sexton, dude?
Colin Sexton looking pretty good, man.
Dude, guy is an animal. He's awesome. And talk about somebody who wants to get better. That guy keeps getting better every time I look at him play. And defensively, he's kind of sneaky good all around.
I think I'd pick Darius Garland over him. And I know that might be sacrilegious.
No, what are you talking about? That's the worst take. That's the worst take I've heard you make on the show.
Darius
ever.
Garland is a pretty good basketball player. I'm gonna put it out there.
You're crazy.
Darius Garland, man.
I can't believe you just said that. No. Oh, the disappointment, dude. I don't know if people can hear it in my voice. Oh my God. Garland is he's playing so much better already this season than he did last season. He was ass last year, dude. He was bad. Even for a rookie, he was bad. He made RJ look like a all NBA player last season.
I don't know, man. I think he's got the ability, man.
Give me Sekou Doumbia.
Sekou Doumbia. You like Doumbia?
No, I'm just kidding. I do like him though. I think he's going to be pretty good. We haven't even talked about Michael Porter Jr. He's got to be up there too. He's got to be up there. I mean, the guy's a freak. 6'10", moves like a 2 guard. I mean, he's an animal. I love Michael Porter Jr. Obviously, another local kid for us in the Pacific Northwest. But man, I think sky's the limit for him too. I think, give you a bold take, I think he's all NBA in 2 seasons.
Michael Porter Jr. all NBA in 2 seasons. Wow.
I just think he's his upside offensively.
That's kind of stunning and brave of you.
It's less stunning and brave than Darius Garland over Colin Sexton. That's the craziest
Darius
thing I've
Garland
heard.
can pass the rock. Colin Sexton's more of a scoring guard. I like, and maybe this is just me being biased. I like my guards that can assist the rock. I like.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I like that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I don't like a guard who can pass, but I don't know, man. Colin Sexton. Colin Sexton has been playing out of his mind
He's been
the
playing
first
really
4 games.
well. You know, that bull
And
defense, the bull stance. You know, just kind of getting
but
that getting ready for the NBA season. He's
he's
been.
averaging 25.3
Yep.
points a game with dude, he's pretty solid, man. He's pretty solid. His turnover is still a little higher than you'd want to be.
Yeah.
But man, that let's hold on. We got to talk about the Cavaliers for a second.
You want to talk
This is
about the
probably
Cavs? Okay.
this is probably the most shocking start to the season out of anybody. And definitely I would say, oh man, I find it hard pressed to say that this is sustainable. However, when I really stop and look at this team, and I actually said I thought they were going to be the worst team coming into the season, like literally a week ago when we did our prediction video or stream. I actually like this team. I like a lot of their players, man. Larry Nance looks awesome for what like his role is on the team. He's been great.
Definitely.
I'm a huge Dylan Windler fan. No, I'm just kidding. He's awful. But Cedi Osman,
Seti.
Andre Drummond was a
Resurgence.
guy, dude. He was a guy that they were borderline overpaying to get off their team in Detroit. Like they were doing everything in their power to get rid of him without giving a first round pick alongside him. And
Exactly.
the guy is like he's leading their team in steals, blocks, and rebounds. Obviously, rebounds. He's the best rebounder in the league every season. But dude, especially this year, man, he's been incredible. And I love Okoro too. I think he's going to be great.
He's going to be good
right now, though.
He's going to be, to me, he reminds me of like, if he can live up to the expectations, I think he could be like another Jimmy Butler type of player. Kind of like be able to finish around the rim, but able to kind of do everything else. Shooting wise, not the best. I think he needs to work on that. But other than that, man, like he's a good player. What sucks now is that Kevin Love is out for 2 to 4 weeks with a calf injury. It seems like that guy just cannot catch a break as it turns to his health. JaVale McGee is shooting threes. Who would have thought? You got Darius Garland, Andre Drummond, Colin Sexton kind of as like your big three, and then Seti is like that four. I want Seti to take another step forward, and that was kind of what I was hoping and expecting from him, but I haven't seen that just yet. And so I'm hoping, and this is probably going to be the final year where I kind of expect it from him, is to take that final step to move forward to be that player, to get a guy that can average, 17 to 18 points per game. Like that's where I had his expectations, but so far it's kind of been a little bit meh from him, but
he's been like one tier below that.
Yeah.
Still a solid player. Still a solid. They haven't even had Kevin Love for half their games too. And he's out for a while, I think, right?
Yeah.
He's out for like 3 or 4 weeks, as always.
Pretty sure.
All right, Bernie, last question. I want to ask you one more thing, okay? And I mentioned this to you before we started the stream. Do you have any updated awards predictions after watching only 4 games for most teams?
Updated rewards predictions. I think I think most improved I'm going to have to change. I think I had DeAndre Ayton there. I just think he plays in a position right now where I know that he plays on the Suns team, but man, it's hard for a center, I feel like, to get the most improved player. So I think it's going to be a guard more than likely. Like we talked about, who did we say that was kind of in that running now?
Markelle
Fultz, definitely in that conversation. Shai Gilgeous also in that conversation. I think it's going to be a guard, and I think it's probably, let me just look at my list really quick. Let me just look at these teams. Oh, man, it's tough. But
what about Colin Sexton?
Colin Sexton is definitely high up on the list. I think it's going to be, if I had to pick anything, it's probably going to be Christian Wood. I think.
Hey, my pick for the preseason, dude, 27 points a game.
He's looking pretty good, man. And I think that Aiton is not going to put up that many points because he's playing with Booker, he's playing with Paul, and he's going to be more of a rebounding guard or rebounding center, getting you some easy points, maybe getting you some buckets here and there. But man, it's going to be tough for him to sniff that most improved. But that's the only one that
Yeah.
I'm really changing. I'm not really changing anything else because I still have faith in a guy like Anthony Davis to kind of bring it home and to get himself an MVP.
Yeah, I'm still sticking with Luca. I still think he's going to be MVP. Um, I said Christian Wood. I'm sticking with Christian Wood, but like
Sticking
Colin
with it.
Sexton, Markel Fultz are definitely like they're creeping up. And I would say that Colin Sexton, if he was to play like this for the rest of the season, I think they'd be pretty hard pressed not to give it to him.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
as a guard on a bad team to score 25 points, like
Mm-hmm.
on a team people thought were going to be bad. If they like are a playoff team, oh man, he's probably got to get it because they were dead in the water last season.
Exactly.
um, yeah, that's pretty much it, man. That's a good stream, man. Good conversation.
Yeah, man. We did like we talked about some basketball. We did some life goal things as well. That was probably a little bit longer than I think anybody out there was expecting, but still a very interesting conversation. And let us know in the comment section down below if you guys are live with us in the live chat. Let us know what you guys thought of each and every story, right? We talked about Trae Young. Is he really the MVP of the season? We talked about the Wizards. Can Westbrook and Beal turn it around with their own 4 start? And then we also talked about a little bit about the intrinsic value of these players. Are they playing too much for the money and the gratification now instead of the long game, working on their game? And also, guys, we talked about, of course, our most improved, changing our awards and everything like that. And before we get going, guys, and before we kind of say our final things, please remember to hit that like button. Also, remember to hit that subscribe button if you are new to the channel. Every subscribe, every like makes this video more accessible to other people. Lets YouTube know, like, hey, these guys are really good. You should give them some time and effort to look at their content. And guys, we're so close to that magic 1,000 number. So let's make sure that we can get to that point. Hopefully, you guys are, in the comment section chatting away what you guys thought about this podcast. And before we go, Pete, do you have anything to say?
Closing thoughts. Only one thing. Precious Achua, my sleeper pick for rookie of the year.
Slipper pick of the year. We got Tyrese Halliburton. We got a lot of these players. I think I had LaMelo Ball. That's probably something I probably will change, but I still has to be a wait and see on that one. But anyway, guys, thank you once again for tuning into the Charge Daily Podcast, giving you the latest NBA news and rumors and also basketball opinions. With today being a very basketball opinion oriented show, we appreciate each and every one of you here on the Charge live chat or in the comment section if you guys are watching after. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, time subject to change. My boy Pete will be probably more of a regular on here at some point. We just have to figure out a schedule. But anyway, guys, like I said, my name is Bernie. This has been your boy Pete, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace, guys.
Take care, guys.